Welcome for the board advance on February 2nd. The agenda, so flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Board agenda approval. Can I get a motion for board agenda approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Lori. And
I second.
thanks, Phyllis. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Board agenda approved. So do you have anybody from the employee organization?
No, we do not.
Okay, thanks. Megan. So the next one is the public comments and the guidelines on items for on the agenda. There is a comment card, and if anyone has some, they can put it now. And what we are planning is actually for the board advance. There are multiple sessions. There are 4 sessions. So after each or beginning of each of this, or after each of the sessions, you can have a public comment on that. I think instead of having everything put together, so that they don't have to go back and do it. So after each of the sessions, they can go and do that. Okay. Thank you very much. So let's go to 5.1. The board advance agenda. I just was going to take.
All right, so we will kick off the board advance. As Satish mentioned, we have 4 different sessions that we wanted to highlight today. And so we will have time at each one for some discussion and then public comments on them. For 4 items that we have wanted to spend some time with, and just as a board advance, we try not to put any items that we're taking any action on. This really is a time for us to provide information, have that discussion, and for future work. So we are excited about the 4 topics that we brought. We will try to designate a certain amount of time for each one so that we could keep ourselves on the time schedule. We wanted to review our board protocols. We wanted to share our communication plan. Over the last 6 months, we have brought on our director of communication, have really modified and changed and expanded how we're able to communicate. So we're excited to share that with you, what we're doing and where we're headed with that in the future. And then we did want to provide a budget review, and this really is based on the governor's budget that was released in January. This is the current information that was provided in January. We know that when we see this budget information, it is most likely going to look different when over the next couple months. This is really the governor and gives us an idea where his focus is. We know that then as the legislation works through it, things will be added, removed, modified. So just always a reminder that this is what the budget looks at this point. It will change again in 2 months. It will change again in May. It'll continue to change all the way through until June when it's adopted by the governor. So I just wanted to preface that as that information is put out there. And then the end of the meeting, we wanted to continue our discussion about middle schools. We have some additional data information that we want to share with you to do the comparison of what our 5 middle schools look like. We will be joined by our middle school principals so that they can be part of that communication and dialogue as well, as we plan where do we want to go and what our next steps are with that as well. So with that, I will kick it off with our board protocols and procedures. So if we go to the next slide. I know that you all have the hard copy in front of you as well. We had changed kind of the format of our board protocols over the last year. And so this really is an opportunity to review where we are with them and where we want to go, or if there's any changes or modifications that we want to make. The first part is what we believe in our commitments is really pulled from our strategic plan, that overarching direction for us as a district and where we want to continue to go. The priorities under where we see the district priorities really have been a guide for all of us throughout the school year. As we created these district policies, they really were district priorities, not just for a year, but over the course of a multi-year. We develop a budget as a multi-year. Our district priorities are aligning with what those budget priorities are. We also then have bled it down into, as Allison has shared over the course of meetings, and we'll continue with our LCAP. And so our district priorities are embedded into the LCAP. Our district priorities are embedded into our school site SIPSA plans. This was our first year that we invited all of our principals in at the beginning of the school year. They actually came in and shared what their site plans, their goals, their professional goals, their own site plans were, and how they aligned to the district priorities as well. So we feel like all of our arrows are pointed in one direction now. We all are working in the same direction, are able to support strategically where we're going with the students. And so my recommendation is again, to keep our district priorities. They cover those three different areas: our academics, our budget, and then our community engagement, which was a big focus for us. And again, I think we've added some areas onto it that have increased our ability to communicate within and without internal and external of our community and our staff. So I think those are very important as well. So if we go to the next slide, this is really just a breakdown of each of those areas that we've identified under the protocols. And so just wanted to spend a short time going through each one, seeing if there is anything that you want to change. I think our protocols have served us well through the last year as we've had many variety of types of meetings. We've moved from completely virtual to a hybrid to back to in-person. And I think these have really helped us guide our way through some very emotional driven topics, allowing our community to still participate and be part of our board meeting. So I thought what I would do is we'll put them up there. You can read quickly through them. If there's any changes that you want to make, then we could stop and talk about them. So where it says no changes, that's my recommendation, but absolutely if you feel differently, this is for your work to be done. So I'll pause.
Yeah, should we stop in each of the slides and should talk, or should we go towards the end? What do you all think?
I think if we just put each slide up, if anybody
Yeah,
has
I
a question,
think
comment,
that-
then we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I had some thoughts about how we handle public comments, and I know we also have a slide at the very end of this. Should I, because that's sort of board meeting, but everything is sort of board meeting. Maybe I should wait till the end to talk about
We
that? What
actually
would be
do
more
have
appropriate?
one for, we don't call out public comments
Right, we have
necessarily.
sort of
We may
communication.
want to add that as another section.
Sure.
That-
You mean
That's a
then,
possibility.
when we're there?
Why don't we do it at the end
Sure.
as an additional section?
That sounds good. That sounds good. All right, thank you.
Communication media / public, does it include that or no?
We could, or it could be a separate.
Yeah, I'm
Depending
happy
on-
to do
depending
it
on
as a
what you want
separate
to
section,
outline.
just not to dilute the intent of the slides you've set up here.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thanks, David. Any other comments here, or should we? Laurie?
We're good on that one.
Okay, then now I think, so we go with the no change here. Okay, thank you. So continue, please.
Next one is agenda items and agenda setting. I do really value the pre-boards and hope that we can continue having those. I think those are important parts for us to have that conversation.
Anyone,
Okay.
any- Okay,
Communication, board members and staff. I know one of the things that we had added when we did the protocols last year is that Friday memo from the superintendent and staff. And I know that staff enjoy the opportunity to be able to provide some of those updates to board so that they are frequently shared.
so this is working.
Just a comment to say that really like the Friday memos and appreciate the staff for taking the time to give us each a summary each week. It's been really helpful.
Thank you for raising that, Sylvia. I think the rhythm of them feels really good for staying informed. And I have really appreciated some of the ed services pieces in particular, because I feel like it's a good way to sort of stay in the loop with what's happening with the curriculum and with the classrooms. And I feel like all of it's valuable, but I will give extra kudos for those pieces, just because I think that's, the reason why we're all here. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
I had a comment about communication, and that is, I think as a board, I want to make sure that we're being careful. This is a difficult time, I think, for the staff. There's a lot going on. And I think we have to be really careful when we're requesting information or things like that that require staff time to make sure that it's something that we really need in order to be able to do our jobs well and not just a nice to have. I mean, the nice to haves can come, I think, in the quieter times, but in this really busy time, I just hope we're all being cognizant of the fact that the board is, or the staff is working really hard, and we shouldn't be burdening them with things that aren't super important.
Council. Really anything? Any comment?
No, I agree with everything that's been said.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you.
I think pretty much, I think, yeah. Thank you for all the comments.
The next area is voting, which we had very, very small, short protocols on it. I did want to highlight and bring out the roll call votes. We've had some conversation about, currently we do a group roll call vote, which when we were all in person, it was very easy to see how people were voting. I know it has been challenging as we've been in this virtual mode, and even to hear the ayes or a thumbs up, and the majority of our participants are virtual, and we know that our community enjoys being able to join virtually. So wanted to throw out consideration of a roll call vote that we could put into place. We've already posted the agenda for tomorrow, so we'd put it into for the future, but just wanted to get some feedback from board members, how they feel about a roll call vote.
I'd be in favor of this. I feel like there's sometimes a cacophony of eyes. It just seems hard to tell sometimes. And I think the fact that we have so many audience, well, not so many, most of the audience members are remote. Having the roll call votes, I think makes that the voting preferences little clear. I think at one point, this board used to do roll call votes. I'm not sure, how or what it transitioned.
We did
to
it
this.
under several superintendents
did?
over the years, and it varies
Okay.
from board to board and from superintendent to superintendent, so.
Is it one question? Is it only for the actions, or is it for everything? Like, for example, just to say favor, you have to roll call, or
So it would be anything that you were taking a vote on. So when you approve the consent items, right now you ask all in favor of aye, all opposed no, you would do a roll call vote for each one of them.
So is there I guess my question is the same as Satish's, but maybe I have a slightly different way of saying it. Is there an option to do some sort of hybrid where we could say for procedural things like approving the agenda or consent, we can just do the group vote versus, information discussion / items that we're making a larger decision on come action items come, under the rule of roll call.
So really on the board agenda, there's only two types of items. One is an action item that you are taking a vote on, and the other is for discussion, whether we call it information or discussion. So I think in consistency, if you are taking a vote as a board member, then we'd want to be consistent and have it as one or the other.
All right, so I would prefer that we do the hybrid for procedural stuff versus for action. I'll just state that as a preference, just for sort of expediency, but I'm okay if obviously if the majority is everybody just wants a single way. I would say if we're going to go with making this move, that we might want to explore like technological solutions just to speed it up, because the process of having to call each person's name and get a vote seems maybe cumbersome in this day and age. And I'm wondering if there isn't just a system where it's just a register it and then it can become part of the minutes, but it doesn't have to be something that we sit there and ask the board president to call out each name and actually roll call. So
I would just push back a little bit on the electronic one, because unless it's a way to allow the public to know how we vote, I think it's important that the public knows how we vote. And I don't know if that can be done electronically.
We could certainly have our IT explore that as an option.
So-
Without, understanding what you're saying is if you were to do a polling or a roll call vote, if you marked your vote, it would have to show up on the screen where then the public could see where each individual.
Well, in some way.
Sometimes that's
I don't,
more
maybe that's
cumbersome.
only important to me. I don't know, but
no, the systems I'm thinking of is city council meetings where it is just up on the screen. So that's sort of where my,
so it is public. How everybody votes is public.
Sylvia, anything?
I think probably my question is for Phyllis. Just curious, when there were differences in the history of this board or in the history of Cupertino's board, I guess what were the pros and the cons?
Well, it was never really a board decision in my recollection. It was more the superintendent's preference about how the meetings were conducted. And as a board, we kind of went along with it. So when the superintendent liked roll call votes, we did it. When the superintendent was fine with voice votes, we did it that way. So it wasn't so much, I don't actually remember until now ever discussing it as a board. We just did kind of what we were told to do in terms of how we voted. Well, not how we voted, but you know what I'm saying.
Method of voting.
Method of voting, right.
Got it.
Okay, so.
I don't have a strong preference
Okay.
one way or the other, so I'm happy to go with the will of the board.
So my thing is that what's the significance? Why do we, okay, what is it triggered actually? Why we are saying that this is needed? Or what was not going well? That's I want to see from the other side of it.
Sure. So we're very effective and it's perfectly within our legal realm to do a group vote. The only challenge is as we are sitting here in our meetings with our mask and we're saying and calling out an aye, I don't know that it's always distinguished that we know that all 5 members have said aye. It's really difficult. And I think in some transparency to our community, if we had each member give their vote, they would verbally be able to hear that. If we were in normal times, which who knows when or what normal would even look like, you know, we're able to see each of the face and hear each of the voice. But for right now, we know that we're going to be in mask for probably some time.
So here now the procedure, if this is going to be implemented, the president will be calling one by one what your.
It would be, so we'd actually build it onto the agenda where it would say roll call vote and it would have each person's name so that Nancy could record the names and the vote.
Same like Sylvia, like I don't have any special preference here because it has been going okay from my end. Unless as you know, Laurie said that specifically for actions, maybe more people will be or everybody will be worried or concerned about actions what you're taking, right? So some of the real big topics, some actions, right? Yeah, where each of us stand probably would be a good point. So I don't know, it's hard for us to be differentiating between actions and non-actions, then I'm okay in either case. But it would have been nice if you are going only for that and all other things, like for example, agenda approval. I don't know whether it really makes sense to call everyone's name. It's more a ceremonial kind of thing, right? Because in your agenda, if any changes, for example, we would have raised our hand, hey, can we take this thing out or can we do something like that, right? But
so if there was an interest in it, we could say that we would do the roll call votes during specifically the action items and leave the other procedural ones. You know, again, I think it's just so that we're sure that our community is understanding how people are voting and where the votes are coming from, and we have that clarity.
yeah, just this is my thought again, like that. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, if I could just share, I mean, I certainly would and can support what Lori's suggesting here. I think for me, it's just, you know, certainly last year when we took a vote, I really try hard to make sure I heard 4 different voices aside from myself. And it's hard sometimes when it all overlaps. And I don't know if people online can do that. And I think what I sort of learned with AB 361 were these virtual meetings, we would have to be taking roll call votes. I know we're in person now. But then I think the fact that the audience are still online, I just feel like having some sort of a way so that it's clear how everybody voted. I know what Lori's talking about. For instance, Cupertino City Council, there's a button you push, and then when all 5 votes are locked in, then it's displayed automatically on the screen and on the stream video so everybody can see how everyone voted. So in some kind of system like that would be good, saves time, it's expenses though, right? I mean, nothing's perfect. So my main input is just trying to hear all 5 voices say that. It can be difficult sometimes. So there's some other way to do that. It would be nice. So yeah. Anyway, so my 2 cents.
So how about I'll recommend we'll explore this electronic version if that's possible, just to expedite time. And I can bring it back at a board meeting and maybe I'll follow what Phyllis says and just bring it back and say, this is what we're moving to. How does that sound?
Well, I mean, to be clear, I'm fine to do the roll call by voice until you have a chance to explore solutions. Like, I'm not saying that that needs to stall the process at all. I'm just saying it would be nice, I think, just for, I mean, I think we've talked a lot about how to get back a little bit to the notion that these meetings really, critical business of the district is conducted during these meetings, and how can we make sure that the emphasis stays on the time for the discussion and the time for the collaboration and getting the information so that we can make the informed decisions. So I guess that's just my thought, is that I really do want to make sure that we're trying to keep the focus on how to move that forward. And I think, like I said, I'm not opposed at all to adding in the roll call vote, by voice first, and then exploring other opportunities to streamline that process as we go. It's just, it seems to me that the piece that it's most important for is really the action items after we've discussed and been informed and all of that, versus the consent and the procedural stuff like agenda setting or whatnot. So
Just a thought as I'm thinking about some other school districts that I've attended their board meetings, like I know the high school district, they have one of the staff members do the roll call. So then it's not on the president to constantly have to be doing that and have to kind of tally in your head what's going on. It's a staff person who's like saying each person's name and kind of, keeping record of that. I don't know if we need to I don't know if this meeting is for that.
That's how city council is actually. City council, it's not the mayor or the head of the,
Okay.
yeah, so there is, I think,
Yes, I'm trying to see.
yeah, the city clerk calls the name and they call council members on and so on. Yeah.
We can explore that.
So, yeah.
Let me take all those ideas back
Okay.
and come back with a
So do we need
We'll
one
kind of
more discussion on
finalize.
this, or how is it going to be presented back? This will come as like kind of some, again,
I will share it with you in your pre-board so that then we could plan for our future board meetings, what that would look like.
so typically these kinds of things proceed, okay, the protocols are not part of the board meetings, right? It will be only on the board advance we talk.
Well, the board events, we really try not to do any action items where we'd ever have to do a roll call. I think that was one of our
No, I'm
commitments.
saying that this kind of protocol changes. This is a protocol change, right?
It
So
is
this
a
can be
protocol.
brought in a standard board meeting, or does it need a?
It doesn't. So what we did last year when we did the board protocols, we took the feedback from the board advance and then we recreated our placement for it and made all the adjustments and shared that back out with you. So we wouldn't need to bring it back to another board meeting.
Okay. Okay, so for the timing, I don't have to call your name.
Yeah.
So I would just like to say, I still believe it's Stacy's decision and not ours, but just for the record.
Okay,
I'm fine with that. When you're ready to make a change, you let us know.
Thank you.
It would be my opinion. I don't know where my colleagues are on that, but
anyway, we'll definitely have a discussion, right? How
Yes.
it is going to be. It's not going to be just implemented.
I said, I'll have conversations with you in our pre-board because our board agenda is already posted for Thursday and we're already in prep for the following board meeting. So
Fine. Okay, thank you. So we can move on then. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
social media and board members. I know that last year we had spent some time with this, trying to refine, utilize some of our legal advice from DWK as to make sure that we're covered and protecting.
Can I jump back to communication with them?
I think we skipped a section.
Thank you.
Oh,
I was scrambling to find it on my slides. It's like, I don't know.
Do you have something on this one on
I do,
communication?
I do, I wasn't sure. Okay, so I guess I'm fine with everything here. One thing that's not kind of covered in here is meetings with the public, like in-person meetings. We know that our community has requested one-on-one meetings or two-on-one meetings or those kinds of things. And all of us as board members want to have that opportunity to meet with the public and have those dialogues in a more, informal setting. But should we have some protocols about that so that it's not, especially if we have community members meeting individually with each board member, that there's not that there's kind of a similar expectation, I guess, is what I'm asking.
You're basically proposing like a log or something where we would just log who we met with so that we know if there's potential for serials going on, or
I'm not, I don't have anything specific that I'm asking for, other than should we, perhaps maybe the question is, are there some protocols that exist already within that legal can provide or that CSBA can provide or something like that, that gives us a template for how to do it, how to have meetings in a way where, because we know that we've had, let's say, community members telling us, oh, we met with so-and-so and they said they're gonna do this or that, even though we don't know whether or not that's true, or even though if that board member didn't say that or did say that, but, and in order for us to stick with Brown Act, and make sure that we're staying above the law. I don't know, is maybe am I the only one concerned about this?
No, I think my view here, I think it's completely out of, like, if I'm meeting somebody outside the board, right, outside the, two ways I can meet, one as a person, right, as a community member, I can meet another community member, or they may be meeting me, and wherever okay, I think which we have been following, just it's my opinion, kind of, right, I'm not talking, or you're not talking, it's a board's opinion, or we think, you never use that, we there, you, I only, right? And most of the times you just listen, right? You may answer something, but there is nothing more you are committing there. But even if you're committing, it is not going to be a responsibility of the board anyway, because board has to make a decision with 5 people anyway, right? So one person tells something, it's not going to make any, kind of a rule or anything there, right? I don't know whether that would be too much for legal or the district to control whom we are meeting and how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think the important element on that really is that, and it is somewhat called out under the on the second to the last bullet, or the last bullet about the retaining the right to respond to anyone, but not on behalf of the board. If we wanted to add some bullet, just reminding that as a board member, you can meet with anyone you want. It's just really the importance to express yourself. You're not representing the board, you're representing your one board member, hearing from them, because I think that's what I've heard over and over again is a lot from the community, because they believe they met with one board member, that board member represented all 5 board members and had an opinion. That board member was one board member sitting there listening. They weren't making decisions. They weren't acting as a board.
yeah, as I'm reflecting on what you're saying, Sylvia, to be, totally transparent. Yes, it worries me. You're not the only one concerned. I think that where I try to frame it in my head is I can't control the public's behavior, but I can control mine, right? So I can listen, I can assume that what I'm being, if somebody's saying to me something like so-and-so said, or so-and-so promised they're gonna vote XYZ way, or told us they're gonna vote XYZ way, right? Like, I think I can't control that. They're gonna do that, but what I can control is my choice to let that influence me, right? So I think to a certain extent, like what Stacy's saying in terms of maybe our protocol is more around common messaging that we all use when we're starting these meetings, right? Like I'm here on behalf of myself. Any discussions we have are really only my opinion, don't represent the board. Just need to let you know that even if you choose to tell me that you've met with other board members, I can't let that influence me in any way, and I won't let that influence me in any way. I don't know what else we can do, because like I said, we can't control them. We can't control what they're gonna do. And certainly there are times when some of those meetings have been all about trying to coerce or intimidate through some of the ways in which communication is directed. So, I think maybe Stacy's on the right track in that maybe what we talk about is more like agreed bullet points of messaging we all agree to remind the public of when we have meetings in our role as trustees. I mean, I think the other thing I'll say, you know, in response to Satish's comment about, you know, I can meet with another person just as a fellow person, or I can meet with them as a board member. I think it's a fine line in the sense that even people who are my friends are still thinking in their back of their mind, like they can't totally dismiss that I'm also a board member, right? So I think we have to be sort of careful with that, and that maybe part of the responsibility of being a board member is just saying, no matter how comfortable you are with that individual, you still make sure that you're sort of covering, you know, the 3 bullets that we agree on to kind of be that common communication.
I agree with you, Lori, and I think one of the things they tell us in that Masters in Governance class is you're always a board member.
Yeah.
So, so I think to distinguish between a community member and a board member gets a little fuzzy. I think it's a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah, I think the only people who ignore that I'm a board member is my wife and my kids. So I certainly, I think, understand I think the issue Sylvia's getting at. I think that is an issue. I think I'm maybe agreeing with a lot of the comments here is that these board protocols really govern our behavior here, and we can't really control what folks do. But with that said, I would support if we have staff put together a little bit of a sort of, this is what to expect when you talk to board members. So we get all these things out there, right? And we put it up on the web, and we just tell people, go to cusdk.org/talk to a board member, and that's what you should expect. And that way we set consistent expectations for everyone we talk to. And whether or not they abide by it, that's really their thing. But at least we get everybody on the same page. So that might be a good sort of compromise, not necessarily a protocol, but sort of a procedure, and just, yeah.
We could actually link that then to this policy and procedures, so that there would just be a link there, maybe under the communication item.
Yeah.
We could
So
also link that when you get a request for a meeting, right? So like if you're responding to a request for a meeting, you know, please review this before we meet, you know?
So do you think Stacey, like the 3rd bullet should be, currently it's talking all about email responding, right? Should we be, I don't know whether you can revert for a meeting or in person or whatever it is. Do you think, because the message is very clear here, but it is currently it is limited to the email response only. But in-person response or something should we be modifying this bullet?
So are you asking, should you be notifying me every time that you have
Not
a-
more than I think
or what?
notifying here, I think respond to the emails using discussion, right? So individual board members may directly respond or talk or whatever instead of just emails, right? So currently it's only an email response we are talking, but a response could be, as Sylvia said, that somebody could be calling you or somebody could be asking you to meet, right? So it's a response again. It's more than just a mail, right? So maybe this, I think this bullet covers quite a lot, actually quite big. Maybe should we be expanding that a little bit, or?
I think I understand. So instead of just calling out the emails, if you're meeting, it would be something using your discretion, whether you notify me that you're having that meeting or not.
Correct. So just I'm throwing in, you know, currently it's limited to only email. So email is one, definitely, but over and above.
But I think it's a courtesy to let Stacy know when we meet with community members and what we talked about. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's also, I'm just saying that add in, you know, meeting in person or something more, if we can, just take a look into that.
Okay, well, how about if we add it as another bullet, because I think if
Okay,
we
that's
probably
fine
with
too,
emails, we'll mirror some of the language there, but we'll call out instead of emails, we'll say meetings.
Thank you. Any more changes, any more discussion here?
just one more on that first bullet, just really board president or the superintendent or her designee, right? Since we use designee in the second bullet, I know sometimes Aaron's the one who speak to the media, so maybe just to kind of codify that practice. You could. Thanks.
Good, thanks.
Nice catch.
Yeah, even just a / superintendent / designee, yeah, would cover it, yeah.
The next one is the social media board members. This was the one that we expanded last year based on some
Yeah,
legal input.
okay, so you're okay.
Okay with me?
Yeah, good. Okay, then we'll move on then.
The next one is the after hours meetings with principal and staff. We've had any issues or concerns with that? Okay,
I just have a question about the third bullet. Are we continuing to meet with the CEF leadership?
We had last year,
Okay,
so yeah,
just curious.
So what is the thing? See,
a meeting with C president with, we
Still
had
there.
we had done that last year.
yeah, but we didn't do anything this year. So.
Yeah.
It just
it
started.
just
so-
started. You're okay.
Okay.
This one, pretty simple.
As it should be.
We'd like to continue that. Next one, the complaints, issues from community. We've certainly gotten to utilize this. protocol. We okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay, and then the last one is the school visits with the board members. And I know that we continue to use the same 5 schools this year, so we'll do a rotation on schools for in July so that you'll have a new 5 schools for the 22-23 school year.
I've been avoiding school visits because of the whole COVID thing. Should we be, or should we continue to visit? I'm not sure how to do that.
I know many of you have been out visiting and, again, as long as meeting with the principal ahead of time and notifying them.
Right,
I think
all
they would
that,
be
yeah.
welcome and, they put the guidelines. So when they're walking around, they're keeping their social distancing and, the classrooms popping in and staying the distance from the students. But I think it's appropriate to go.
Good, thank you.
Is board office hours considered part of protocol or is that a separate topic?
We could add it into protocols. We hadn't called it out, but if you'd like to have board office hours, I know we've had some questions about. We didn't have them for a while. We put them in place. We're still doing them twice a month. There had been some conversations. Is that too frequently? Now that we are back in person in school, I know that the last couple board members haven't been heavily attended, but we are still getting participants from the community, which is great. So if you'd like to add that as a internal, I think this is the time.
So what we will be adding on that actually?
Actually calling it out as one of our protocols is that we do hold board office hours.
And I'm wondering if twice a month is too often.
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but
This is
the last couple I've done have been really short, not very many people there, not very many questions. We've ended in 30 minutes instead of an hour. So it kind of feels like maybe twice a month is overkill, but maybe not.
And we could leave the flexibility in the language and just establish board office hours are held once a month, but always have the ability to add additional ones as times need.
How are the rest of you feeling about twice a month?
I think it's kind of frequent.
Kind of what, frequent?
Frequent, but at the same time, right, you don't know, it's like you don't know when the stock market's gonna pop. You don't know when 50 people are gonna show up. So I'm okay with, personally, I would support reducing the frequency, but maybe we put in something to let the public know if there aren't people asking questions, we might cut it off early. Sometimes I've seen a lot of folks really jump on to listen to what other people have to ask.
Right.
Right, and then
exactly.
I feel like a talk show host that no one calls in at, and I'm trying to, right, we do this for so long and to share news, but yeah, sometimes. So if folks have the understanding that if there aren't questions, we'll not, just like if you went to a professor's office hour, they wander off. God knows, they don't stick around, students don't show up, so, yeah, so
I mean, I
My two
think
cents.
if we go back to monthly, then I think I'd want to put a backstop in it that's like at Stacy's discretion. If
Yes.
there's a hot
Mhm.
topic that's
Yeah.
Yes,
clear that it would help if we have one,
yes.
then she just needs to let the 5 of us know, and a email goes out from Nancy and 2 of us jump on to it who are available. Like I would want to backstop it. If we're gonna reduce the frequency of the regularly scheduled ones, then maybe just something that gives us a quick turn. We can schedule one within a matter of days or a week.
So maybe the kind of language that Stacy's suggesting, I don't know if you said occasionally or maybe not be specific about monthly or bi-monthly or whatever.
I know one of the positives of having it twice a month is that then we could have a morning one and an evening one. I
Right.
don't really know if there's a difference in the number that are attending. I think they've both been similar these last several board. Office
So a lot
hours.
of information is anyhow being, because two meetings are there, board meetings are there every month anyway. So another 2 more, I think it's a little overkill, my view. Again, so maybe once in a month and or based on the demand, as you said,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
if the topic is really critical, the hot right now, and we need more, we want to hear more, then how
We can
you
always
did
add.
town halls and things like that, right? So,
Yeah, we can approach it the same way. We'll just, say, maybe putting on our protocols, board office hours and what board office hours are for, so we give the definition of what a board office hours are. And then that leaves us the flexibility to add, I'll ask Nancy to put together a schedule that just is on a monthly and maybe rotates intermittently, whether it's an evening or a morning one. So we did get all those. And then as we roll through, and if there are some topics that come forward that we feel like the community needs to have more of a voice to be heard from for the board, we can absolutely add more.
So similar to how we handle meetings where the superintendent and board president, and right now you can call special meetings. You could then also add in special office hours as you see need, and then call us in to schedule them. I think what Lori says makes a lot of sense, sort of, based on the need there.
So from my point of view, I think as a protocol, probably doesn't make sense to have your town meeting, a superintendent town meeting on the same week as board office hours, because I know that was happening a lot because we were just scheduling them as a matter of course. So I guess that would be one protocol to follow. The other thing that actually was brought up at our CSBA conference and at one of the workshops I attended was that other boards for other school districts will do a staff board office hour, which I thought was an interesting idea and something that, where staff would be like in the afternoon, after school hours, or and a special time for staff to be able to speak to the board.
Did they do that like quarterly or
Yeah,
trimesterly?
so a lot
or-
of other board, school district boards do office hours much less frequently than us. Probably, I would say like probably once a quarter, and then like one of those is a staff one. I'm not advocating that we go down to a quarter, but I think it was interesting to attend this workshop and find out just kind of the frequency at which other boards are doing it. But several of them did do one that was just specifically for staff, which I thought would be, nice for us to do.
Would there be an interest of setting up a quarterly?
I mean, it's certainly something we've heard from, like a requests that come in and basically say, would it be possible to have a meeting with, 2 board members that isn't necessarily the office hour? And oftentimes that corresponds with the ones that are during the daytime and staff just can't make it. So, yeah, I mean, I think, but if we're going to keep the monthly most months, maybe we leave it to your discretion, Stacy. If there's a month where it's just there's so much going on, maybe maybe the August-September one is on September 7th or something and kind of bridges or whatever. But if we're doing approximately monthly, then I could see doing a staff one like trimesterly 3 times a year or quarterly.
Be happy to put together a schedule. I think it just gives that one more opportunity for people to reach out and for you as board members to hear. We're a large district, large community, large staff, so I think that's important.
Just a caution not to let it get into negotiations because that's a real possibility and a slippery slope. So
So,
I think we have 2 more slides.
yeah, so this should have been later.
So board committees, these are the current board committees that you are all participating on. They are all board committees except for the wellness is actually a superintendent committee. They're all active right now. We tried to get when the next meeting dates were, but as you can see, there's a lot of them that are to be determined. So somewhat the thinking is, do you want to continue on these committees to finish off the school year and then do committee adjustments in July when we adjust to the schools? Or are there some of you that feel, I see Phyllis's name up there pretty frequently when I put it in this graph format. So I didn't know if there was any of you that are.
well, parcel tax isn't functioning right now, so that's, yeah. No, I'm fine with it, actually, unless somebody wants to take any of those spots, I'm good with it.
I feel bad you're taking so many. If you enjoy them, I'm totally fine with
I
them.
do, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I am ready to roll off of parcel tax. I know that's not on the agenda immediately, but it is a large time commitment, and it's one that I think is challenging in this community. So I'm ready for a break after doing the last 2. There we go.
That's not active right now, is it? Or is it? it's
No.
not? Okay.
Nothing going on now.
So if we'd like to, we can take Lori's name off of that. We can come back and visit it as we enter into conversations with the parcel tax and revisit it at that time.
I also think maybe we want to make, Phyllis and I talked about that last year about, it's not really the parcel tax ad hoc, it's more ballot issue ad hoc. So we might want to consider
New title.
renaming
Could you
that.
say a bit more about that? I mean.
Back last summer when we were considering parcel versus bond and what to go out for, like, I think either way, there's going to be a committee that forms around that and trustees that sort of get assigned to that.
Got it. Okay,
So I think it's more about
um,
things that CUSD might have on the ballot
Mhm.
versus a specific type of measure.
Got it. Okay, all right. So not really work with any specific campaign committee, but a more general
Well,
version of just
it's the board members that would liaise with
with the,
any
whatever,
campaign
right.
that the district might be involved in. Yeah.
Another thing we might want to think about, I've been involved in a lot of successful parcel taxes, but the last 2 have not been, and they've both been Lori and me. So maybe a whole fresh new group, two different people might bring a new perspective to what a campaign looks like. I don't know, but I think it's something we need to consider, that maybe two different people for this round. And especially if we're going to, and this is not on the agenda, but if we're going to think about both the parcel tax and a bond, the same 2 people can't do both. I don't think, it's just too much work. So, but I think there are lots of things to think about in terms of board involvement in those, in that arena.
so presume we discussed that when there is
I would
if
recommend,
such a committee.
so that you know what you're
exists.
signing up for when you volunteer to be on this
Mhm.
committee. And I did want to point out that that is supposed to say 2021, 2022. Those are our
Yeah.
current committees. Lost a year somewhere.
And then, regarding the other assignments, I'm fine to continue, but I'm also fine to give somebody else a turn with anything else I'm on, or take a turn on something else if somebody's ready to roll up. So that's it for me.
Are you, how interested are you in budget? I'm interested in budget, but I know this is
I mean, I will continue to follow the budget
budget no matter what.
no matter what. I enjoy it, but if you want to turn on it again, I can.
I mean, I'd like to try that if it's not a, yeah. Would that be all right? I don't want to take away something that's,
No, that's fine.
Do you want to do that?
Is-
Our
I mean,
next
do you
one is
want-
coming up.
we
February.
could finish out the semester. I might make a better break than rather in the middle. I don't know what the meeting schedules are.
So you want to roll it when we roll schools in the summer? I'm fine with that.
That's what I was thinking, that'd be a more, sort of, more aligned with the fiscal year, right?
Okay.
It probably makes more sense too, just in terms of finishing this budget cycle.
Right.
Because like I know we're going up to Sacramento for
Yeah.
pledge action and stuff. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I don't mind switching, but I feel like I just joined it.
Yeah.
And then I think we've only had like 2 meetings. So yeah, like doing it at the year end
July.
makes sense. I had a thought about, I don't know if this is considered a board committee or something else, but doing a kind of a 2x2, but with the high school district and Sunnyvale district. Because I know, as those three districts, as 3 districts, we do a lot of stuff, kind of are the same community, and I know the superintendents meet together pretty regularly. I know that there's interest at the high school level to create that kind of committee. Just from talking to some of the board members there, is that something that we could maybe, or that you as staff could go ask if the other 2 districts would have any interest in that?
Sure, I can check with Fremont and Sunnyvale. We do meet, or try to meet weekly as superintendent, so certainly can check with them if there's an interest.
Especially as we're thinking about matriculation from 8th grade to 9th grade, and as we're focusing a lot on middle schools, I think it would be good to have more frequent communication between our district and the high school district in making those decisions.
And are you seeing that as 2 board members and the superintendent sitting up on it?
I'm not,
2 board members, or maybe we flush that out a little bit. in
yeah, I don't
conversation.
have a specific, thing in mind, but if it's kind of following the 2x2 model, I believe the Los Altos one is a 2x2, right? Because it includes the Sunnyvale district, is that right, Lori?
I don't think Sunnyvale
or the-
district, no.
No.
It includes,
Cupertino, Fremont High School District, and the
Fremont
city
High
of
School.
Los Altos.
so that's a 2x2.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but not Sunnyvale.
And Sunnyvale shut down their 2x2s, so Sunnyvale's not doing it. That one used to include all 3 districts, but
Sunnyvale the city or Sunnyvale the district?
Sunnyvale the city, sorry, yeah. Disbanded what used to function as sort of that combined meeting space, but that used to be all 3 districts in with the city, but they
Yeah, so even if it's not with like
they have their own way.
and if we can't make it work with all 3 districts, maybe just with us in the high school district, I know for sure that there's interest from them to do that.
Happy to follow up on that one. Okay, and then the very last one is, this had come up when we were actually rescheduling this board advance, is the title of the board advance. And so out of respect to it, we had some different feelings about it, wanted to bring it back. We currently call it the board advance. We do try to, somewhere when we say board advance, we try to explain that it's a study session. So is there a way to capture it all? Do we want to just continue with board advance? Do we want to call it a board advance study session? Do we want to call it just study session? And so just wanted to open that up to all of you.
So I am opposed to changing the name. I think advance is aspirational. I think it's visionary. I think it says that we are looking to the future about how we're going to best serve kids. I think it's historical. I think there was a pretty good reason for picking it to start with. And I think it's unique. We're the only ones that use it, and I like that. So just weighing in, just my opinion.
Anyone else?
I'll go.
Yeah, I think you started this, so good.
Difference of opinion.
So I think like having, and I appreciated Phyllis kind of giving us the history at the last meeting about that. I guess these are or other district will call these retreats. And
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
the previous.
Long time ago, Superintendent.
Superintendent
Yvette
says we don't
was in there,
retreat, we advance, and I love that thought. I can appreciate it as an internal term, but I think because of the amount of public, I guess the way that these meetings are still held in public, and because like you said, we're the only ones that use this term, there's so much non-understanding of what the term means. And so for the sake of the public, I would suggest we go with study session because that is a commonly understood term. And it's also more understood in terms that it's not a voting, it's a deep dive. And it makes more sense to everybody who might be coming and wanting to speak at public comment and those kinds of things. So I guess that's where I'm at. Like, I wonder if there's some kind of compromise that could be made, like an internal understanding or a nod to that term of advance. But I think from a public document point of view and from a notification point of view, I would prefer that we stick with a more commonly used terminology.
So do you get a lot of questions about what is in advance?
Not specifically what is in advance, but I think we do get questions about why are you doing public comments differently here? Or why are these meetings held during the day when the public can't attend? Or are working, or like why we get comments about like, why are you restricting access by making it during the day? Those kinds of things,
But
right?
does it, so would it be different if it were called by a different name?
I think so, but I mean, I can defer to other people, and everyone else's opinions.
I'm opposed to hybriding the name and calling it, board study session and advance with a little ampersand in it or something. I mean, I do sort of, I'm trying to reflect back. I remember when I first started coming to board meetings, which is like forever ago now, I was confused by the term board advance. So like, I hear what you're saying. Like the first time I saw that, I was like, what is this meeting? I've been coming to these nighttime meetings and now here's this daytime meeting. I think I figured it out very quickly, but I don't know. I really like the nostalgia and history of it. I also do think that Phyllis isn't wrong that sort of having that, it's more than aspirational, it's purpose driven, right? It is acknowledging that it's a chance for us to move forward on some, big topics. So, yeah, I guess I'd prefer we either keep board advance or we hybrid something that includes board advance, but I wouldn't want to see advance go away.
So I don't know if you guys, I don't know if we can bring back the actual agenda to see how it is posted. So it's posted as a board advance, but then when we come to the topic of the 5.0, it says board study session is highlighted in the black band, and then the 5.1 is the board advance. So that's how we've called it out and have been calling out. I think that has been on our last couple of board advances to try to incorporate in, it's a board study session, but what our board study session is our board advance. So I don't know if that's still gotten questions about. I don't know if the title is going to change the daytime or the nighttime. I think we've all gotten those questions. Why are you offering it during the day versus the evening?
Jerry, anything?
Sure. Last night when I was prepping for this and I got to this part, I was like, yeah, we got to get this name changed. What's a board advance? But then I was listening to what Phyllis just said, and I think there's something to, the quirkiness of being different, right? There's 1,000 districts in the state, and the fact that we're the only one who does this, I think gives us there's that unique personality kind of thing. And so I think, from 5 minutes ago to now, I've actually changed my mind. When we started this, I was like, I gotta change it. But I think I'd be good with just sticking with board advance. I think it's a name. It gets people asking, what is it? Gives us an opportunity. I had never known about the whole retreat advance thing. And I think this is something we could play off of to kind of get interest. And so, I think I would be up for just keeping it the way it is. Just, really change my mind in the last 5 minutes.
And I do like what you've done to this. I mean, this does category board study session. So that's good.
Yeah,
But what we can also do too is when we send out the information, when we post the board agenda, we can add an explanation as to this is a board advance, explain why it's in the day. So it could go out as that when the agenda gets posted so that the public can see that this is what a board advance is, this is why it's during the day, and then this is why we call it a study session. So we can give clear
So,
information to them when we post.
so can I ask a question then, to my turn? So the study session, so here truly are we, is it a study session actually? Is it like, it's a lot of reviews, some updates, some informational presentation, right? That's what we are doing here. Study session can misguide a little bit on some trainings or something as well, okay? So my thing is that here, most of the time we built around protocols or some pretty much informational stuff, like, which general in a standard board meeting, which we cannot, for example, middle school in this case, okay? So middle school parity and stuff like that, which will be hard for you to accommodate it. So we are doing it here. So it's like more getting more information kind of thing rather, and maybe some feedback as well. But something truly like kind of, we are not talking about a training kind of, or something of that kind, right?
We forgot to give you homework for this session.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
think. So I'm not truly study session also, that name really suits also. I'm not sure, unless you're going for a completely different name, kind of, right? So just a thought. I mean.
I guess what I'm mulling over is Jerry's saying he's thinking through it as we're going, like, I think that story that Phyllis shares is so sort of key and important that maybe you create a slide that you start these meetings out with that just says, in Cupertino, we don't retreat, we advance. I mean, I don't know, but something to just kind of introduce it, to just sort of, I want to say, brand it sounds so wrong in this context, because that's really, like I said, it's more than aspirational. It's really a function of how we do deep dive onto, things that we need to take in larger volume and spend more time on. So anyway.
So what?
I think from my perspective, I think if you have to constantly explain what the title means, it loses its meaning. So I guess that's where I'm having trouble accepting that as just the name by itself. I would be more open to like some sort of combination of board, study session, parentheses, advance, or something like that, or maybe switch the other way around, only because unless there's some intro slide every time that has that aspirational message of, advancing versus retreating. But I feel like anytime I talk about an advance, I always have to then spend another minute explaining what an advance is. So that's just, I mean, it's not that big a deal, so like if.
So what if we took that pressure off of you, that you didn't have to explain it, that we did put better communication when we're sending out the information about the board advance, and we can certainly, because I love the background of why it's called the board advance. I think we highlight that at the beginning of every board advance for it. I think part of it, I know that you have shared with me, I know that I get questions as to more along the line of the board advance. It's why is it in the day versus the evening, not necessarily a board advance or a board study. So, I think, again, the more we can explain why we hold it during the day is just as important.
And I like your term, Jerry. I like the quirkiness of it. I like that let's be different. Let's not be, every school board has a study session. Let's not have study sessions. Let's have advances.
So need more.
I'll go with the one.
So
I will have our director of communication, she will come up with a fabulous slide that really highlights. I know that, I can see the gleam in her eye from here.
So no roll call voting here, right?
No need to vote. Input is very.
We know how the roll call vote would go on this one.
Okay, so we will, this won't come back as a discussion.
No, it's done. I believe we have our next board advance in April.
Okay. So any other items in generally so far to discuss
Yeah, I had,
before we go to public
yeah,
comment? So,
just,
yeah.
I want to talk about public comments. So
No, we are going to talk
Oh,
about
public comment, public.
on
No, no,
this topic.
I had actually an idea to toss out with regard how we handle public comments that are not on the agenda. I know we've sort of moved them towards the back of the meeting, and I understand and support that because we want to do the bulk of the business when we're sort of still alert in early in the evening. But I think then what happens then is, the longer the meeting goes on, the more indeterminate it becomes when people ask, when do I show up to make a comment to the board, right? If it's at the beginning, you can tell them come at 6:15 or something. When it's 5 items in, you have no idea. And I know the Cupertino City Council had a similar issue, and the way they handled it is they allocated a block of time in the beginning of the meeting where the regular time is. So they basically limit time for items not on the agenda, comments for items not on the agenda and I think for them it's an hour. We could talk about what that is, and you take as many as you can, and then any others that don't get called on go to the back of the meeting. And that way, if we have some controversial thing where there's like 50 folks coming in, that doesn't, you spend half hour on it, you don't disrupt everything. But a lot of times it's just it's about this or that, and a lot of these are just, onesies, twosies. And if we allocate a half hour, you could handle maybe 10 comments, maybe handle those in the beginning so that we have a bounded time for comments for items not on the agenda, so people don't have to be up till whenever it is to speak to us. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there to see if there's any interest in sort of a hybrid version of not have it all in the beginning or all at the end, but a bounded time towards the beginning of whatever time, 15, 30 minutes, and then the rest of it doing it at the back, just so we can handle the cases because I really want to not, put obstacles in people just having concerns about things to come speak to us about it. So wanted to throw that out there to see how people felt. I don't feel strong about it as the advanced thing. Well, I'm sorry, but the other way around. I think this is one I actually would like for us to think about. But it's okay if nobody else feels this way. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah, from
I'm curious because I don't think we've gotten a single email of concern, did we? After the last.
No, I think it's just me
Um,
thinking about the process and having it on the back. No, there hasn't been an outpouring of complaints about this.
I guess just like to reflect on it, I'm not wed to where it is in the meeting. I think to me, I struggle a little bit with putting a limit on it because that makes it seem like we are limiting. And I do think we have sort of a practice, for better or for worse. Sometimes it's been both, of allowing everyone to speak. And so if the thing that allows us to focus on what we need to focus on, but then allow anybody to be able to have sort of there is no limit on it, then to me, it makes sense where we moved it, just from the standpoint of, I do want to come in with my freshest eyes and my freshest ears and my freshest, thoughts for what we need to focus on. And sometimes public comment not on the agenda is just fine. And other times it's really challenging or distracting,
Sure.
or, especially as we've dealt with a lot of sort of false information out there. Sometimes that's really a challenge to start your meeting out that way. But that said, we don't, we have committed to, and I think for good reason, to not limiting that, and have for years, predating all of us except maybe Phyllis. So, yeah, but I think, I don't know, I'm troubled with the thought of limiting per se. And so I actually see sort of moving it as the compromise to not put a limit on our community members, but.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I didn't quite see it as limiting, as more prioritizing the fact that some people can get to speak earlier in the meeting. And I'm particularly thinking of sometimes we'll get someone coming in to, I don't know, complain about this one thing or that one thing or whatever. Or a couple of meetings ago, there were a number of SEIU folks coming in to speak about a particular thing. It's to capture the 2 or 3 or 4 folks, right? And then sometimes we get 30 folks, all really not on the agenda. So I guess the way I look at it is more prioritizing some of them so that they don't have to wait till 10 or 11 to have their, it's 2-3 minutes. But I certainly understand where you're coming from, wanting to start the meeting with a fresh, that's valid also. I really just wanted to get thoughts. So as a potential alternative.
I mean, I guess it would really, to me, as you know, if I'm just discussing this with you, to me, it would matter like what kind of time, like an hour seems like way too long.
Right.
If we're talking about 3 or 4 comments, you're talking about 10 to 12 minutes, like that I can understand.
Mhm.
But if we're pushing into it going on for, a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour longer, as we've, certainly had it go on for hours, plural, that's really when it gets challenging. So I think if I don't know, I'm very curious to hear where everybody else is at on the hybrid idea, but if we were going to do a hybrid, I would certainly be in favor of something finite that isn't going to really detract from spending the meat and the time on that stuff that we have to get through.
I don't have really strong feelings about this, but I sort of see both sides of it. I see the benefit in letting people come in early and not have to wait till the end of the meeting. On the other hand, I think they have lots of opportunities to communicate with us aside from public comment. So there's that. And then I also agree with Lori in terms of making sure that we have all of our energy to focus on the really important things we have to discover. So for me, it's the will of the board. I don't have a strong feeling one way or another.
I like the idea of doing maybe like setting an allotted time for public comments not on the agenda at the beginning and then doing the remainder at the end. I think we were all just listening to a panel discussion from 5 different superintendents, including our own, and one of them I think did bring up that that's a practice that they do, that they set aside. They say ahead of time to the public, we're allotting this time, and then if you don't fit in this time, you can go later at the end. Or I think during a particular item, they set a time and then they say, okay, now we need time for the board to discuss. And then after the board gets a chance to discuss, then we can hear more public comments. I'm not saying we have to do it that way, but just to hear that there are other boards doing something similar makes, to me that makes sense. Because I agree, because there's going to be times when it's just 4 or 5 people that want to say something at the beginning rather than waiting till 10 p.m. or something like that. But then if there is going to be something where it's like 30 people or 40 people, then we do still give that time at the beginning, but then everyone else can wait till the end. If it doesn't get to go.
And if that was the direction of the board, what we could consider is doing it similar to what we do with closed sessions. We put a closed session at the beginning. If we don't finish closed session, we come back so that we always start our meeting on time. So we could put public comments not on the agenda, limited to 20 minutes, and then come back at the end of the agenda and have that built in as well. So for the most part, we don't get a lot of comments off the agenda. But if there was, for some reason, that started to increase, there would always be that opportunity you'd hear for the first 20 minutes, which would allow 10 comments basically, and then move the rest to the end of the agenda. That would be an option we could explore too.
So can you talk to us a little bit about what the protocols around that would be? Like, I guess the 3 things that are jumping into my mind with that, the first would be, would we keep the same, like if there's 40 that come in when items are called for not on the agenda, do we allot time based on there being 40 of them, and we're gonna hear the first however many that takes 20 minutes, let's say 2 minutes apiece, so we hear the first 10, the other 30 go to the back end, they still get their 2 minutes, right?
Right, so it would still be the president's decision as to how many minutes would be assigned to each. So with a requirement that all comment cards are put in at the time of the agenda item. So with it being early on the agenda, you would see public comments not on the agenda, last call for any comment cards. We'd be able to assess then how many comment cards came in, determine the amount of minutes. The first 20 would be heard. Any of those that came in that weren't able to be heard in the 20 minutes, we would hear at the end of the meeting. We wouldn't continue to accept comment cards.
Okay.
That would be closed out at that.
That was my question number 2. And then my third question to that would be, do we randomize? Because I know like right now we're taking comment cards in advance. So my fear would be that people might, the same people might get in the habit of turning it in 48 hours before. And that's the people we always hear from early, as opposed to, can we randomize so that everybody gets a chance at that initial period of time?
We are able to randomize those. We could do it that way.
I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I feel like it's important that everybody has an equal shot at
A
that.
lot of our community hasn't utilized turning in the comment cards ahead of the board
Okay.
meeting. They still tend to come in at the time of the board meeting, but we do get a few. We do get a few, so we could
But
randomize.
how are we doing right now, right? The advantage. So that's, I think, let's understand that. Is it randomizing or no?
I'm sorry, we don't have any public comments. up
No,
there.
no. How is the public comment being handled now? Like if advance, like 48 hours before if someone submits it, 24 hours before someone submits it, how is the priority given, kind of?
As they've been submitted, as they're submitted.
Yeah, so it's not random. It's a clearly it's in an
Right.
order, right? So,
We haven't had the need, there hasn't had an abundance of
Yeah,
amount, or also, the time in which they turn in has not been, as Ms. Yao had mentioned, it's not so far in advance. It's usually the day of.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think keeping a fixed time is definitely, that's important because that will not disrupt any of our planned activities, right? So if it is 20 minutes, 20 minutes, okay, 30 minutes, I don't know, whatever we feel. So I think let's not number of comments, it's a time, it's very clear, right? And if you are going to give only 2 minutes for the first set of people, even the last set of people also get only 2 minutes. They won't get extra for sure.
Correct. You'd want to set that, establish that at the time,
Yeah.
so we know how many.
And I
comments there were.
prefer even public comment, the comment card turning from the beginning itself, not like through the meeting, like means like, let's say you have 25 people. All 25 people should be giving when the public comment starts. And only 10 we were able to accommodate, other 15 will get later. But they cannot do it in between just because we are extending it later.
Correct. So it would still be an established agenda item, public comments not on the agenda. That would be our last call for any of the public comment cards.
Correct.
We would see how many had been turned in there. If we're able to get all the comments in that 20 minutes, great. If not, then we would go up to 20 minutes and then we would continue at the end, but we would still not be accepting any further submissions on the comment cards.
Okay.
So
We
if
do
originally
see,
30 came
and
in,
just to
30
be
would
clear,
done.
we do see comment cards come in after the item has
Yeah.
been called, and we do not call on those comments,
Correct,
right,
correct,
per our
yeah.
policies, yeah.
I think, yes.
Those are the ones that get forwarded onto us. So we
Correct.
see those.
Yeah, we see that, but we respond, yeah, correct. Yeah. I think so, are we okay for having a 2-session kind of thing? Means like, okay, we don't want to say 2 sessions. Actually, we will limit our public comment at the beginning for 20 minutes. If anything excess, we will do it later.
How long
Kind
at
of
the
thing.
beginning? 20 minutes?
I would recommend 20
20
minutes at the
minutes
beginning.
is okay, yeah, I
Public
think
comments
that's
not on the
okay.
agenda.
Yeah, so we can, let's say 2 minutes, even if we take it, 8, 9 people can get accommodated,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So at least, yeah. Yeah, I think it, yeah.
We will need to make that adjustment for the February 17th, because again, the agenda is already posted for tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's fine. I think, yeah, it will be following kind of thing. Yes, thanks for the.
And I think in a typical week, we'll probably get through them all in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah, most likely, unless, yeah, very rarely we have, items not in the agenda. Yeah. So that's fine. Okay, now coming back, discussion is over on this whole topic. And
I think we're
any
ready to-
public comment on this session? The item 1, basically.
No, there are not.
Okay, then I think we can move on to the next study session item.
All right, thank you. So next is our communication plan. We're a little off our time schedule, but that's okay. I think we will get through the communication fairly quickly. I am really excited to get to share the work that is being done with our communication. And again, just being able to expand and really focus on our community engagement that Leslie Baines has been doing, as well as the communication that Erin Lindsay has. I think think that has really strengthened our district, strengthened that communication tool both externally and internally. Again, that was a huge area of focus for us. That's why we developed an own district priority for that engagement. And so excited to bring this aspect forward, and I'll turn it over to Erin to talk about our communication plan.
All right, thank you so much. We are definitely off schedule, so I will do my best to try and get us back on time. So I thought we would start today's study session. This will be a study session with a game. So you have little pieces of paper that are paper clipped together. You can work by yourself. You can work with an elbow partner if you'd like. Since this is kind of a quiet activity, you could also stand and sit next to someone else if you want. There are little picture icons of our different communication tools. There is the name, which is in purple, and then there are a couple different sheets that have communication scenarios or types of communication you may see within our district. So I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of spread them out, sort through them, and go ahead and match. And then throughout the session, we'll pause and give you the opportunity to perhaps rearrange or change. And then at the end, we'll have a third opportunity to kind of review and reflect on what you learned from today's session on communication. All right, slips of paper down. Again, you'll have time throughout the session to relook at them, to maybe move them around and check to see your thought process on the pairs that you made or the matches that you made. So it's serendipitous that you just recently had a conversation about language and the use of words and the meanings behind them with the term advance. And this is one of my favorite quotes about communication or communications, a term often debated whether you should use the S or not. And so, you know, for me, in thinking about the communication throughout the district, it really is two halves of the same whole. You can't have one without the other. You can't have strategy and creativity without the tools that are employed to implement that communication. So in today's study session, we're going to talk about some of the specific tools that we have in order to strengthen and embolden our why, which is really our strategic plan and our district priorities. So the first instance where we see communication called out is, in fact, in our strategic plan. And you know, why do we need communication? Why do we need communication tools? And really, it's building that connection between home and school, between what's going on for a student in the classroom and having the ability to share that with their families and their parents at home. Also, the connections that we form as staff, knowing that we're moving all in the same direction in terms of our priorities, and really sharing our strategic vision with not only our CUSD community, but at a larger scale. So we see this called out in our strategic plan. We also see it clearly defined in our district priorities. So as Ms. Yao mentioned, we have three focus areas in our priorities this year, involving academic excellence and personalized learning, stakeholder engagement and involvement, and district sustainability. And again, without that foundation of communication and the ability to share and work together and collaborate, these goals and priorities are unable to come to life. So it's really important. So in terms of this year and looking at what our focus areas are for communication and our communications tools, we do want to see that the information is timely and meaningful for the people who are receiving the communication. It's accessible, meaning that they get it when they need it at the most. It's visual, It allows us to tell a certain story, not only with words, but with also pictures or graphics. It's collaborative, which means, not only are we sharing the information, but we're gathering information back from our stakeholders. We're having collaborative conversations. And once again, it's really driving the strategic plan forward for our district. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to look at some of our internal communication tools as well as our external communication tools to see how we are really implementing the why. So these are some of our internal communication tools. I would hope that many of the icons look familiar to you. Obviously, we rely heavily on email, our Google Calendar. One of the new things we implemented this year was an internal master calendar with some of our important deadlines for our certificate and classified managers to make sure that we're all aware of what's coming up in the months ahead throughout the entire school year. Google Drive, where we have the ability to collaborate on Google Documents, spreadsheets, Google Slides, such as this, our video conferencing tools for when we need to meet virtually. And a new tool that we started last year was called Google Currents. And it has a kind of like a social media feel where you can post a question or content, and the members of that current are able to comment and reply and tag. And so it takes perhaps what you are used to doing in an email field and adds that layer of collaboration onto it. So if I have a question that I feel like maybe a few of my colleagues also have the same question, I might post it on Currents. So I'm not having to send an email back to the one answer to several different people. So it kind of brings them into a collaborative space. It's also searchable, which comes in really handy when you are getting a lot of information internally. And in the back of your mind, you remember, oh, I think I had seen that somewhere. Where was that? You can search it, and it's you can find not only the content, but if you remember, oh, I think Miss Maines had posted about it. I'm going to search her name, and all of the posts that she has made come up. So this is one of the tools that not only have we been using at the site level, but school sites also have these as well, where they're using it with their staff. I'm going to pause there. Any questions or comments about some of our internal tools?
I assume Currents is like Slack.
Very similar. As a teacher, I was known for my pregnant pause, as they would call my mentor teachers. So I have no problem waiting for long periods of time for people to respond to questions.
Do you find that teachers are using Currents to collaborate with each other?
Yeah, we do. We did set up a current for not only each grade level, but also each subject area. We also have a full CUSD current, CUSD educator current, where all employees are allowed to join. I think where we saw it really kind of develop was when we were not able to, pop over to the next door teacher and, ask for a lesson on, the rock cycle. We did use Currents as well during our September Learning Day as a platform for teachers to post and share things that they had learned in their different virtual sessions. And we have seen some collaboration happen in those spaces.
And is it mostly within the school, or are there like teachers at one school interacting with others?
Yes, it's across district wide.
It's great.
All right, we'll move on to some of our external communication tools. And we see these at the various levels of our system. So at the district level, the site level, and at the classroom or level. Hopefully some of these icons again look familiar. We have our main CUSD website, which houses our board docs, Parent Square. We use Zoom in addition to our Google Meet. Parent View, which is part of our student information system, where parents can go and check their child's grades, for example. We do use social media platforms, and then at the classroom level, our two most highly used communication tools for students as well as teachers are Google Classroom and Seesaw. Some of you might be wondering, why do you have so many different communication tools? Unfortunately, there's not one perfect communication tool out there, and we have a variety, because we have a variety of different stakeholders and types of communication that need to be done. We do utilize a variety of different tools. So we're going to dive deeper into a couple of these tools today. I'm not going to go through every single external communication tool that we have, but we will be going through a couple. The first one I am excited to share is that we will be launching a new district website later this month or the beginning of March, followed shortly by new school sites for the beginning of August, excuse me. And I would like to take the opportunity now to show you a preview of our up and coming website. Our communication analyst, Pam Durham, has done a great job. Feels like spring cleaning, where we're kind of, going through our old website and looking at what things we want to keep, what things we need to change or revise, and some pieces of that previous website where maybe it's not needed anymore. So here is our new website. Again, it's still under construction. But we are trying to have a more simplified approach where it's easier to find the information that you need, as well as provide and have more visual icons and photos available to tell our story. Actually, this is not our full. Okay, there we go. So we have news and events, again, with pictures available of the event. Latest news, our calendar. Highlighting what sets us apart, including a description of elements of our strategic plan. A message from our superintendent. A great feature of this website is that it's also translatable. So you can pick the language that you would like to use to interact with the website. Some visual icons that take us to some of our most commonly used areas of our previous website. And then we also have this traveling navigation bar, which is nice because in the world where you scroll a lot, you might scroll for a while, also depending if you're on the mobile version. So this has the ability to kind of help you keep track of where you are and also where you want to go. Some of our sections on the navigation bar include About Us, Registration, our approach, and then our different departments. And then as you'll see under each one of these main navigation menus, there are popular links. And these can change over time. So, for example, right now for registration, a popular link might be checking the wait list, and that might be a popular link we have throughout the year. Another popular link we could see leading up to, for example, open enrollment. We might place that popular link there in the popular links section. The entire website is searchable, so you can search for key terms. We have the list of all of our schools. Again, these school websites will be launching in the fall. And then we have some other quick links we could call out as well. That's just a short introduction to what's up and coming for our website. In terms of website traffic, you have two common users. You have people that come to the website maybe once or twice, and so you need to make sure you have that information there for them, so they get a sense, like when they go to that first time they go to CUSDK8.org, they get a sense of who we are as a district. And then you have those frequent users that come back again and again looking for something more specific about that they need a form, or they're an employee, they want to have access to a certain document that perhaps Ed Services shared. We want to make sure that the website caters to both types of users. For our staff, we are looking at, currently we have an intranet where staff have to sign in to see a different side of the external website. We are looking at streamlining that. So when staff log in, instead of having to go to a separate intranet website, they'll be able to view certain things that the public are not able to see. For example, professional development videos that we have perhaps done for our teachers or staff, and having them have a quick access point and just knowing they go to the main website and log in, and then they have access to those tools is a great way to get the information to the different users. I'll pause there, and any discussion or thoughts or questions about the new website coming up?
I'll just start. Really happy to see this, Aaron. This is a terrific job. I think both in terms of just visually, but really, I can see you're really thinking about the use cases from all these little slips of paper here. I'm playing with it right now, and one of the things that is surprising and impressive is you're doing translation of all these pages. So I can literally I'm reading it in Chinese right now. So I guess we put the content up there in English, and then the engine puts it up in whatever language.
Yes. All of the pages, yes.
That's really amazing. No, thank you.
Yes.
Don't have any sort of questions. Just really, and thank you for doing.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Wow.
Please.
I will certainly poke through some more. Is the board going to be included with the staff rollout, just so that we can get a chance to navigate and give you feedback? Yes, on the full site when it launches. And then one of the things I know over the years I've found most helpful is a lot of the sort of, I'll refer to it as archived information, old budgets, old enrollment studies, old things like that. So when you're saying you guys are going through and cleaning up, can I assume that all of that is still going to be, like, the data is all still going to be?
Yes, we never throw anything away. We have all of those records. Yes.
Okay, but navigatable too in the new website somewhere in there?
We have another product that I'll show you at the end
Okay.
that has archivability, which may be something we look at too.
Okay,
It would
great.
be in both, but yeah.
Somewhere that
available.
we can still navigate to
Yes.
find that sort of stuff for big picture thinking.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think we go.
I'm good, thank you.
This
Thank
looks really good, Erin,
Yeah.
so thank you for the work. I remember the last time the district, it's been years since the district updated. So I guess two questions I had. One is, I know with the current one, there's a little bit of difficulty in like creating new, for example, I think when the pandemic first started or when CAC first started, people had a hard time navigating, and we were trying to put like some sort of flashy thing in the front so that people knew where to go. Does this new template allow for kind of pop-ups and things like that? Because I know the current one doesn't really, it was difficult to create that.
Yes, they have pop-ups available, which the pop-up can include not just text or a banner, but it include a picture with like a short description. It's almost a a small page on top of the main page. And we can push those to all of the school sites as well, not just the district site. And then all of these things could be changed, so if there is something that's, specific, the icons can change. It does give us a little bit more flexibility and creativity in terms of how we're laying out the material on the website.
Right. The other question I had was about the rollout at the site specifics, because I remember years ago when it was being done again, and like I was helping my principal at the elementary school because they were so, that our principals are already busy enough trying to put together all the content and all the things. And I remember helping with like PTA stuff, like helping populate some of those pages. But it really depends on site to site, what kind of resources that site might have available to have somebody do that. So will the district or will you
Yes,
be
sir.
able to help and support those kinds of things so that each site doesn't totally vary from each other in terms of kind of how rich or robust they are?
Mhm. Yes, a lot of the content can be shared. So for example, for example, registration, we want registration on all the information on all the school sites, but we don't necessarily want them to change what the district has on theirs. So we have the ability to broadcast out onto the sites. And then when we did share in January or in November that we were transitioning to websites, we did have a large number of principals interested to start early on in the process because, the length of time, as you mentioned, since our past website has been updated, has been a significant amount of time. So, but we are aiming for fall because we know we do have a variety of different talents and scopes available at our different sites. So we want to make sure that we give differentiated instruction and professional development to each of the sites in order to get them up and running for fall.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So one of our most robust external communications tools is Parent Square. And this is a tool that we launched actually last spring and at the district level and really kind of got all of our sites on board to use it as, our main email blasting tool, but it's really so much more than that. It has the ability for two-way communication. So for example, I'm a site principal and I can, send an entire message to my school. I could also send a message to one grade level. I could send a message to a specific class. I could send a message to a group, a small group. I could even have a one-on-one communication with a singular family or parent. And it does have all of those translation features built in as well. So not only can I type the message in my home language, the person on the receiving end can receive that information in their language, but they can also type back in their home language and I receive it on my end in the language that I understand and know how to read. It has the ability for smart alerts, which include the voice, text to voice, text messages, email, and notifications. It has some of those kind of social media like features with the appreciations, or parents can comment on what they call posts or threads. And then again, that translation piece. There is a short video here, but about kind of the tool and what it does, but I'm going to skip that for time. I think most of you are familiar with some of the abilities Parent Square has. I always like to use data to tell a story, and Parent Square has some really great data dashboards available, not only from the district view, but also at the school site level as well. So, just looking at an overall snapshot, it's really exciting to see that 99.7% of our families are contactable through Parent Square. And you might be wondering, well, why aren't we at 100%? Of course, we would always want to aim for 100%, but we do have families who enter an incorrect email when they're registering their child. They put in their work email perhaps, and then they switch jobs and that email is no longer working. Our school site secretaries do manage the uncontactable student families that are tagged in Parent Square and update those to get them contacted. So this is some of our breakdown in terms of, email, text, and app usage. So right now we have 99% of our parents with emails, 98% of our parents receiving text messages, and then our app usage is about 25%. One goal I have for this particular tool is to increase the number of app users. With the app, you have the ability to make some more customizable changes. So you can decide when you would like the message to be received, regardless of when the district or the principal or the classroom teacher sends that notification. So for example, you're someone who works a night shift, you might want to receive that notification at a specific time of day that's not in alignment with when perhaps the school site would be sending it. You also have the ability to change your language settings. So the app features are a little bit more robust in terms of just receiving it through, for example, your email. So that's a goal of ours, to increase those market and increase those app users. There's a variety of different ways that the Parent Square is used. So this is just kind of a breakdown. Auto notices we are using quite frequently right now for our COVID replies. So when a parent submits a positive test result for their student, that parent receives a very individualized email for their child, including the name of their child, the date that their child tested positive, the date of day 5, and then the date of day 10. And all of those are very similar to a mail merge. So we're putting in that information, and so it is able to be very individualized to that specific scenario. Direct messages are those, for example, that I just mentioned, where someone from the district or site or teacher is doing a one-on-one type of communication between a parent. And then our posts are those what we would be considered, kind of those email blasts. Our interaction is actually pretty exciting. Parent Square is telling us to give us a pat on the back because we have 94% of our families interacting, meaning that they have either appreciated a post or commented on a post. So again, we're seeing not only that, the communication is coming out from the district, but we're also getting communication back from our stakeholders. So that's exciting to see. And then this slide just breaks down the type of distribution where the information is coming from. So you'll see district posts. Again, these would be considered, kind of those email blasts comparison to school, class, or group posts. One goal we also have for this school year is to begin a short newsletter from the superintendent's office highlighting areas of the strategic plan that are occurring at the site and district level. The concept of a 3-point Thursday, where it's really kind of 3 succinct bullets with perhaps a picture and a short description. So it's not a long-winded newsletter, is something that we're trying to get up and running and in place. And this would come out on the Thursdays when we don't have board meetings. So before we go into social media, we'll stop here for a moment and take a breather and talk about Parent Square.
So I'm going to admit that I am not one of your app users, but I'm going to tell you why. And that is because I just missed that there even was an app. And so when I saw that in the agenda, when the deck posted, of course I went to our website, and then I eventually managed to navigate to the communication tools under for families. And then sure enough, it was there with the, instructions on how to download it. I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity to almost do like a parent education seminar once a year that's like, hey, do you want to come get tutored on what you as a parent might want to download? Here's how you get the calendar on your phone. Here's how you get your Parent Square app, and just like walk people through that. I would have taken advantage of that as a young parent coming into the district for the first time. I probably might have taken the refresher once every, 3 or 4 years. So that's one piece. And then the other thing I wanted to give you guys feedback on is I love the 3-Point Thursday idea. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity there to make it actionable for parents. I love the idea of tying something to the strategic plan, but even more so, like, give me a prompt, give me something that I can, ask my kid, a way to engage them, because I would do it at the dinner table. So anyway, that's just my feedback.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I'll go next. Yeah, I love this. I particularly appreciate, I think you're making decisions driven by data. I actually would love to continue to see these updates. I mean, mindful Phyllis's comment about not loading staff up with requests, but if it's not a big thing, maybe every once in a while, we could include this in the Friday reports just to see how things are going with this. One thought I had around this is, a lot of times I see today on social media, a lot of the parent discussions, right? It's pretty bifurcated. There are little groups, and sometimes by grades, by classrooms, by schools. And I see people asking questions about things and not getting an answer, or worse yet, getting a not real answer. And that's actually probably worse. And I don't know if that's something, you've thought about in terms of how can we sort of motivate or incentivize people to ask questions here, where presumably there's district staff monitoring and be able to answer, as opposed to they get whoever's out there. Because I've seen a lot of just false things out there, and then it kind of builds. So I don't know if that's something y'all have thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we think about that constantly. How can we be in the same spaces, in terms of digital spaces that our families and parents are in. I think it pairs well with parents learning what the tools are, right? Like Lori had mentioned, I didn't even know there was an app. I think a lot of us are, our phone is our best friend, whether or not we want to admit that, right? We have a strong relationship with that device. And so having something that we know is literally a click of a button where we can get the information is a positive for both as a district, but also as a parent in the community. So yeah, we constantly think about that and try and shift and change. And the world of communication moves so quickly sometimes. And I think if I were to ask every single person in this room about how they like their communication, when they want to receive it, where they go to for their news, or for when they have a question, we would have, an abundance of answers. And it's really, that's the beauty and challenge of communication, is that you have to build a relationship with every single person, and it can change so fast. So, that's, I think, the beauty of Parent Square. And we're trying to we're really actually, even though our data looks, quite frankly, really, really great, we are in the infancy in this product. So I can only see it growing stronger as we continue to use it and getting into those spaces where perhaps we're not at the moment.
Right. I really like what Lori said. I think in terms of getting the new parents into it. I remember as a kindergarten parent, I literally did everything that was on the pieces of paper that I got from the school, right? And I think it may take a couple of years to onboard folks, but over time, I think if we do this, what Lori's talking about consistently, we can drive a lot of the question asking and discussions there. I presume the name Parent Square is a take on Town Square, right? The whole notion. I don't know, maybe they just were thinking of square. But I'm
I think it was actually created, the inception was created by a group of parents. So it is very parent driven and focused. So yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I'll just add something. It's very much in line with what both of them spoke. So I think we have too many tools also, right? So one is I think our parents know that what to use also. You can have wrongly used it also. Some of that sometimes how to reach. Like there are multiple ways to reach it, but probably I know even when they some kind of a self navigation for this, you do this kind of thing, because I think this will be too many choices given to them also can get confused. right? So they have to get navigated in such a way, if you have to reach to your teacher, what is the best way to do, or which one I should be looking into that, because some of the mails, even when I'm getting it also, like I think board, she's getting, this communication is already gone. Actually, one of the responses which I did it yesterday, actually few weeks back, it has gone, but they are just taking one of the old mails and showing us, hey, it's not working, kind of, right? So there is a clearly they don't know where to look in, okay, or we have already done the communication, but it's not reached or it's not read properly.
Yeah, and I think that that's also a great aspect of the app is that all of those posts and communications are in that app. And so you could search for key terms and those posts would come up, whether it's a post from, the district level, or for example, I'm a parent of a kindergarten child, and, my teacher posted about kind of a similar topic. You can see the posts all in one space. So it kind of does help with some of that self-organization. So I think the more we can talk about it, the more we can help educate the uses of the app, I think the better off we'll be in terms of.
Do you think any overlaps are there also between these tools? Then probably that also can avoid if there is a duplication going on.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
No, there are the same message or same messaging is
Yes.
happening through multiple tools. That also probably can be avoided.
Yes. Okay, so switching over to social media. So Peer Square is really kind of like within our CUSD garden, so to speak. So it's really focused on staff, our families. Social media has a much larger scope, even globally, and it is something that we use to share and illustrate our strategic plan and what teaching and learning looks like in Cupertino. Really a goal, and this is, to be honest, a quite lofty goal, even though it doesn't seem like it. We would like to be posting to social media at least once a day with a picture about what's going on and at CUSD, so we can really strengthen that vision, what our story is. When people think about CUSD, Cupertino Union School District, they can search on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and see what that story is. So we do currently have a Facebook. We have approximately almost 2,000 followers. And as you can see with some of the posts that we've had the highest engagement and the highest reach on, they are about what's going on in the classroom. They're about our students, they're about our staff, and that's where we see the most likes or the most comments on social media. In terms of our, who is following us, just some interesting statistics from Facebook. You see, across our cities, as well as, we're international. We have followers from different countries, and just the audience breakdown in terms of gender and age. Just interesting statistics to share with you. Twitter, we have a little bit more profile visits and followers, about 3,000. Again, thinking about in terms of how do we use this tool. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have the ability to connect and talk with each other. So if we post in one social media place, we also have the ability to post in that other sphere. And then recently we did add Instagram as well, new a couple of weeks ago. So again, like social media apps come about and catch fire very quickly. I don't know if we'll get up and running on TikTok, for example, but we try and be in those spaces where our families and community members are. So we're always trying to see like where they are. So I'll just pause there quickly about social media. Any feedback or comments?
Just that this is really great. I love it. I think, to your point about TikTok, I am seeing, a lot of folks, I guess, videos becoming more sort of a thing. And I know earlier we talked about some of the objectives. One is to be visual, and so to the extent. But that content is also takes time. Now, as we're going through this, I'm beginning to wonder, wow, gosh, you must have a really, really busy day. There's a lot here to manage. So beginning to wonder about that, but I'll just sort of add a +1 to sort of video type things in terms of really engaging with folks. But I love this. Thank you.
Thank you. Communication is so key to everything we do, and I think you're doing a dynamite job. So thanks very much. And thanks for the presentation.
Okay, so my last couple slides I have here, just, our key communication tool at the student level. We have Google Classroom, really focused at our middle school level, sprinkled about into our upper grades as well. It's really, it helps manage the coursework, organize assignments. You have the ability to post comments or questions as the teacher. Students can respond back to you. It's all within our safe space of the CUSD domain. And then we also have Seesaw for our primary grades, which is a really robust student portfolio tool where, again, teachers can post assignments, post videos. We did see these, of course, widely and heavily used when we were in distance learning. Even pre-pandemic, these were being used in the classroom, and we continue to see these tools used at the classroom level. I did link, again, just two really quick, short videos on the tool. It's exciting to see our CUSD teachers highlighted in the actual Seesaw company video. We are one of, kind of their golden stars in terms of usage. So it is interesting to see kind of some stats on Google Classroom. Teachers are posting about 1,000 posts a day, and this is not assignment posts. This is actually like, hey, a reminder, or hey, we're doing this today. These are the resources that you need, to get ready for class. And then again, about 50 student posts per day. I think that was much higher during the peak of the pandemic, but now that we're back in person, we don't necessarily need those as much. You can see the student post to family visit ratio on Seesaw. It does drop in November and December because obviously we have the Thanksgiving break and then the 2 weeks off in December. But I would say we average pretty close to October over the rest of the months of the school year. And then the final area I wanted to hit on in terms of communication are our public records requests. I know all of you are familiar with this process, but just to review, under the California Public Records Act, members of the public have the right to request records from the school district. This is kind of overview of the timeline. So a request is submitted, and our district team works to find responsive records. We have 10 days to respond to the requester. That doesn't necessarily mean at 10 days we are providing the records. We just have to respond to the requester. And really that initial search for responsive records takes us anywhere between 1 to 2 days, depending on how the request has come in, how detailed it is, if they're using vague terms or not. So if the criteria is too vague and pulls up too many records, we do ask for clarification from the requester. So we're able to narrow the scope and work with something that is actually manageable. Some of our requests, and correct me if I'm wrong, but have elicited, hundreds of thousands of records, which are not, that actually don't match what the requester is looking for. So for example, the word clip, in our community, we know the word clip, but in an email, we might see the word clip as a movie clip, or here's a clip of this article, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that it becomes very lengthy in the process. And, not only from our standpoint as staff and the time it takes, but also we want to provide the records that the requester is actually looking for. So once we have clarification and we're able to really define those responsive records, we do have to go through a redaction process and redact any non-disclosable information, and that might include student information. For example, we don't want any student record included in those records that we turn over to the requester. And this is probably the longest part of the PRA, and I would say it takes about an hour per 100 pages to do redaction, because we want to make sure that we are redacting everything that we need to redact. We don't want to hand over something that is not appropriate to hand over. And then the records are finally sent to the requester. And this could be, again, depending on the quantity of records, this could be in one batch or over multiple batches. So in order to help streamline this process and to get records, requests, and process them in hopefully more timely manner, we will be moving forward with a new public records software. And so instead of emailing or doing a paper letter of a request, members of the public can submit a records request through our portal, and this will be linked to our website. And it will kind of go through that process. There will also be a public records archive. So any previous PRA that had been submitted will be posted to the archive. So members of the public, if they're interested in seeing, Lori, as you had mentioned, previous archives of various things, it could be here in the archive. Sometimes we do get this multiple requests of the exact same nature. And so this program will also help, as the person is submitting the request, notify them that, hey, there is already a request of this similar nature in the queue. It's being processed. You don't need to submit this request, because all of the public records are public, so they will be external facing on this website. We also have the ability to proactively post perhaps trending topics that we know that are going to, we are going to receive public records on. So this is going to be launched this coming month. So I have talked a lot at a very fast pace. But before we do kind of final questions, I did want to give you an opportunity to look back at our opening activity and perhaps reshuffle around some of the pairings or matches that you had originally thought went together, and allow a small moment of space and reflection for you to just kind of think about some of the tools we have in terms of communication.
So can I have a question on this? Oh, you are asking. Oh, so do this.
Yeah, just
the
take a
question
minute.
Here, is it like a completely automated this site, or you have to do something? It is only for just receiving and keeping stuff, but we have still a lot of manual work behind this.
Correct. This is not, this is unfortunately not an automated system. It still requires myself and our staff to, go through, especially that redaction process. So, but it does allow for, again, like things to be searchable, things to be found, multiple requests to hopefully narrow. And also hopefully it gathers when someone goes to make a request, they put in more information. So we're able to, with that initial record search, actually find what they're looking for in that first attempt versus having to continually go back to seek clarification on what they're looking for.
I would say a single PRA can easily take 15 to 20 hours of staff time on probably a simple PRA.
And this year we've had about 60 PRA requests come in. On average, over the past 5 years, it's been around 30 for the whole year, and we're at 60 this year.
Thank you.
Are most of those local to our immediate community, or are you getting like out of area media requests from outside our immediate local area? Or
most of them are local, the public records requests. Media requests we don't process the same. It's not necessarily a public records request. It's because media is usually asking for a comment on, and not necessarily like the records.
Other questions, comments?
Just one. I was reflecting on these different scenarios you have here, and I really appreciate you doing it because it really helped me open my eyes to the kind of questions people may have, these different scenarios. So I guess two questions. One is, do we still get like old-fashioned phone calls? People call and ask. The one I'm looking at is, I'm moving to Cupertino. I want to know what school my child will attend next year. So is this the kind of thing, I'm just wondering in terms of communications, how much does the phone call to the front desk, so to speak, count in terms of is it most of it digital at this point, or do we get people calling us?
We
A variety of. phone
Yeah,
calls,
we still
Yeah.
receive
Yeah.
quite a few phone calls.
Okay, and then we just direct them to the appropriate digital
Yes.
tool. And I guess the other thing also is we have a variety of tools here to do different things. And so is there sort of, maybe to Lori's point earlier, sort of a primer for folks that sort of, if you have these kind of questions, go here, these kind of questions go there. How do you see, I'm guessing the common entry points are going to be either people call or people go to a website nowadays, right? So presumably we'll have some way of, for each of those entry points, directing people to the correct tools here. Because I actually don't know the answer to a lot of these, I'll be honest. So this has been a learning experience for me also, but is that really sort of, you start at the entry point, you send people to this, you want to go to Parent Square for this, you want to go to the, I don't know, the Records Act, the Records Center.
Yeah.
That's the.
Yeah, and I think really, one of the main reasons we're, updating our website is for that central entry point. If any question, they hopefully should be able to find, starting there, right, at the bare minimum.
Yeah, this isn't easy. I think it's almost this. I think if you're running Amazon, that would be easier because people go there to browse things, to buy, and there's a lot of stuff there, but it's the same kind of thing. And I think the difficulty here is you have so many different kinds of transactions. Some are questions about general things, some are policies, and then they're asking about things that change, and there are specific questions. And so this is a very, very difficult problem to solve, much harder than running Amazon from an information architecture standpoint. So thank you. And thanks. I want to express my appreciation for this. This is really great. I'm very happy to see this.
We don't get to know the results of the quiz?
No, I'm not gonna share.
Any public comments on this?
There are no public comments on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
We'll move to the next one.
Yeah, so on to our session 3 will be our budget update, and Chris Ju will give us a oversight of what was presented from the governor's budget. So these slides really are coming from the governor's budget, whether we receive them from Capital Advisory or School Board Associates. So just wanting to share that information and reiterate again, this is information that came out from the governor budget. We know that it's going to change. So what you see today is likely to change in 2 months and likely to change again before we ever adopt our budget in June. So just wanted to lay that out again and turn it over to Chris.
Well, thank you. Are we good on time? Are we?
We are 14 minutes behind.
Okay, well, I'll try to make up some of that as well. Aaron did a great job. So anyway, I think Stacy said it correctly at first. I mean, today we're obviously sharing with you, what information we have at this moment in time, and I'll be sharing some information I just read this morning. I mean, just as of this morning, there was some information that was released in regards to the Legislative Analyst's Office. They came out and did another retake of what their revenue projections are. So this information is very fluid. And I think the positive of all this is that we are probably in a situation right now where we're hearing, economically speaking, things are very well on the uptake, but at the same time, there's other pressures that are still impacting us, whether it's COVID or if it's inflation, as far as the way our budget typically goes. Our budget typically follows the state budget. So with that, we'll dive into the presentation. Again, it's January. Every January, the governor comes out with his proposal for the 22-23 school year, 22-23, imagine that. And so at that point in time, we're operating off of several different budgetary assumptions. In our original assumption, when we adopted our budget, remember, we adopted a 3-year budget, or actually a 5-year version of a multi-year budget. And so that 5 years look at the budget has all of these budgetary assumptions built in, whether it's COLA, or COLA is the cost of living adjusted. And we'll talk a little bit about that because you've heard us talk about segueing from an LCFF district to a basic aid district. And the concept of COLA now shifts a little bit differently. I'll spend some time talking about that. And then property taxes, that's the new piece right now. So that's plays a larger role, a factor into our budgetary assumptions. And I think my last slide talks about the timeline. The information that comes in to identify the changes with the property taxes are set by the county assessor's office. So we get that information, I think, every quarter, but that information doesn't perfectly align with how our budget cycle is set up in terms of when we start getting information. So I'll talk a little bit about that at the very, very end. And then the other planning functions, the other planning assumptions that we have to factor in are the other costs of doing business, the pension costs, the STRs and PERS. And then I have another slide that talks about percentages, and I can equate it to dollars if that's helpful. So anyway, these are the things that go into these are things that are built into the governor's January proposal. But then again, think about this, the governor's going to come back in May, and he's going to come back with his May revision. And the same thing, at that point in time, they'll take a look at all of these different assumptions. And at that point in time, staff here will be using those and making recommendations for you as a board to adopt as part of our 22-23 budget in June. So that's kind of just a segue in terms of what's to come. But anyway, today it's just talking about the January budget proposal. Next slide, please. And so these are just some slides from school services. I thought they were important just to highlight certain things. And obviously we heard the news, we saw in the paper that the governor in the state of California is projecting a budget surplus for next year, roughly about $45.7 billion for next year. And how's that generated? It's primarily generated from the major taxes. So personal income tax, sales tax, and capital gains taxes are the driving forces of our revenue as a state. There's also some additional things that we want to be aware of. It may not necessarily impact us now that we're segueing into being a basic aid district, but the state is required to set aside money for their rainy day reserve fund. It's similar to ours. We have a 6% reserve currently now to deal with economic uncertainty issues and things like that. Well, imagine the state also has a responsibility to set aside 3% of that, and we're getting closer to the state meeting its 3% goal, and I'll talk a little bit about that on one slide. And then we know we're still dealing with the impacts of COVID. So these are really the things right now that I think the budget is built around. Next slide, please. And this a little bit more detailed in terms of the education part of the budget. So the governor is projecting for Proposition 98. And remember, Proposition 98 represents about 40% of the state budget, and that 40% is what's set aside for education. And so the governor is projecting that for next year, about $16.1 billion is going to education. All that money is going toward current ongoing services, and some of it's also going to one-time services as well. So I think the governor has it distributed out appropriately. One of the things that we're obviously looking at too is the size of the reserves. So let's go to the next slide then. Economics is still as part of the budget. The governor is proposing to fully fund his projected COLA. He's projecting a COLA of 5.33% for next year. A year ago, not a year ago, 6 months ago, when we adopted our budget, the COLA assumption for the 22-23 school year, I believe, was 2.48. And so his proposal is factoring in fully funding the COLA. Also, too, some of the things that he's also looking to fund that are new, it's infrastructure things for facilities, kitchen facilities. I think tomorrow night when Nicole presents on food services, she'll talk a little bit about some of the additional funding that is being proposed in the budget. Things for transportation, there's a chunk of money in there that staff is looking at right now to see if we can move to electric buses. And so we're hoping to get onto that bandwagon possibly as well. And then there's some additional money that's going to continue to fund the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, the ELO program, and also to continue to transition to adding TK into the full grade span. So those are some of just the ultra highlights in terms of where some of the money is going in the proposed budget. Next slide, please. But next couple slides are just economical things. I mean, I think we know what we're doing. We see inflation is on the rise right now. Unemployment is starting to show, and I think as a district, we're definitely experiencing the shortage of staffing. And then everything else right now, I mean, it's mainly the national economy is growing. The state of California, I think the economy is growing. I think it's still probably lagging a little bit behind the rest of the nation. But I mean, bottom line is that as the California economy goes, so does our budget. So in good times, we would be celebrating good times when the state's economy is doing well. And then imagine this, a year and a half ago. Next slide, please. Oops, I'm sorry. Actually, me stop for a second here about the year and a half reference. We can go to the next slide. Thanks. And then the other pieces of I wanted to share with the group here is, as I mentioned earlier, taxes are a huge impact. I didn't realize that when you look at the tax structure right now, nearly 50% of the state's income tax comes from just 1% of the Californians. And those 1% of the Californians are our highest income earners in the state. So you can get the sense in terms of how volatile our progressive tax system is in the state of California. So you can just imagine, again, right now with the stock market the way it's going, and one would think that that personal income taxes could continue to support this. But again, in a downturn market, when capital gains aren't there, that the income tax on that 1% of our largest earners could sway the state's incoming tax from one year to the next. Next slide, please. I mentioned this earlier about the budget surplus, 16.1 billion going to education. This is what I was going to. I'm sorry, go back. And this is what I was mentioning. I mean, again, just a year and a half ago, just as we were going into the pandemic, as you recall, we were hearing that the state was talking about a potential 20% cut to education. So that at that point in time, a year and a half ago, the state was projecting a deficit of almost $54 billion. And so we swung it completely around from $54 billion to, I think it said as a $45 billion surplus. Next slide, please. Here's just the growth of Proposition 98. As I said, it's 40% of the state budget is continuing to grow, which is a great thing. Let's go next slide. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, so one of the things that districts are needing to be aware of is that because of the Proposition 98 reserve, the state rainy day fund, the state is close to triggering that mechanism that will mandate school districts to have to minimize or not carry a large ending fund balance in excess of 10%. However, there are exceptions to that, and one of the exceptions is being a District A district. Next slide. Next slide. We'll talk about it. Yeah. So with the reserve cap. So when the state reserve reaches that 3% level, and they're projecting it will, that then automatically triggers that mechanism where school districts then need to, we can't have caps at more than 10%. And so there are exceptions, and I think fortunately right now that with us moving into that basic aid status next year, we're not going to fall into this category where we're going to have to have a reserve level less than what the board is comfortable with. And I'm willing to take any questions as we go along, if you don't mind too. So stop me if you want any
Can you repeat
clarification.
that, little bit about the reserve cap?
I'm sorry.
Can you repeat that, please, the reserve cap?
Oh, the reserve cap. Okay, so the reserve cap is because of legislation, the state has been setting aside money as their rainy day fund or their reserve fund. It's similar to what we done. We're required by education code, but the state is now mandated to set aside money. And so they've been setting aside money, and they have a limit on there in terms of how much, once that limit hits 3%, then they require school districts then to not, or I guess to spend, I guess a better way of saying it, making sure that they spend down any excessive reserves at the school district level, and anything above 10%. And so that's the trigger mechanism right now that we need to be, well, school districts need to be aware of. Did I answer?
Yeah, got it, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I have a question, Chris. I think this is on tomorrow night's agenda, but I know we're contemplating some contracts for some specialized services like speech therapy and psychs and stuff. And I'm wondering if those contracts are paid out of the general fund or out of COVID funds.
Ooh, I
Or
don't
if you even
know.
know.
I can check for tomorrow night.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I don't need the answer now. Thank you.
Okay, I'll have that for you tomorrow night.
So we, yes.
Yeah, just a clarification of my understanding. So this won't apply to us even if we weren't going into basic aid next year, right? Because our reserves aren't at 10%.
Correct.
It's not end fund balance, it's the reserve that we've set. So this is more for infant.
Well, it's the total, it's your total reserve, your reserve for economic uncertainty and any additional funds that you have either assigned for some future purpose or even some of those carryover funds as well.
Got it. Okay, so because of where our reserves are and because we're moving to basic aid anyway next year, this doesn't apply to CUSD.
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
As I said, I think the timing of it, I think is a huge benefit for us because, you know, we are trending in that direction now where, you know, we're needing to have a much higher reserve than just 6%. And so having this provision here allows the board to make that kind of decision.
Great, yeah, thank you.
Next slide, please.
Oh, can I have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, jumping back a little bit to the big three taxes.
Uh-huh.
So personal income tax looks like it's the biggest one for state income tax, but is sales and use, is that where property taxes come in? Is that
No,
the
this
category for that?
this would be like sales tax. This
Okay,
sales tax,
For
store
retail.
taxes.
okay. So where is property tax in this?
Okay, well, the property taxes, we'll talk a little bit at the end, how it comes to us. The property taxes, think about this, right? These are all the taxes that at the state level, this is generated at the state level, the state gets to keep, and the state gets to use and spend and appropriate. The property taxes are generated locally. However, our property taxes, like other neighboring districts, those property taxes come directly through us, but go into the calculation of what we are entitled to earn, you know, based on student funding. I'll talk a little bit more about that to differentiate the property tax, but that's a good question.
Can I clarify with that? So in my head, the way I think of it, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, is property tax is for us, and these big three are state backfill and categoricals that come in on top of our property tax.
Yeah, another way to add to that, the money that comes from the state, where does that money originate from? That money originates from these various tax sources.
Okay.
Property tax is our portion, and the big three are the backfill, and any
Backfills.
other separate categoricals that exist outside of the
Mhm.
backfill. Yeah.
Perfect,
Okay.
great. Okay, so moving off of the economic stuff, I mean, there's really kind of the nuts and bolts here. So as I mentioned, the governor is proposing a 5.33% statutory COLA. What was in our budget assumption as a first interim was a 2.48% COLA. So the delta is about 2.82% difference. I'll give you this number right now and we'll talk about it at the end. Just with that COLA assumption difference between 2.48 and 5.33, that dollar amount is about $3.5 million. Now, before you start thinking that we have $3.5 million more to spend, remember what we were talking about, property taxes, right? Moving from an LCFF district into a basic aid district means that we are solely going to be utilizing our property taxes. So I'm saying this to you now, even with this increase in the COLA, that increase is not enough to say that we would be getting more money than what we were already estimating based off of the property taxes. So the property tax number will be the number that we're going to be watching. That's going to be the ball that keeps bouncing that we're going to follow, because we've talked about in the past that COLA has been up and down, volatile, that number can sway considerably. I did some simple math in my head. I said, when you look at, of all the funding that we get, how much of our funding or what percentage of our district revenues are actually tied directly to the COLA? And before moving to basic aid, I figured about 94% of our total budget is connected to the COLA. Obviously, there's a different COLA factor for federal funding. There's no COLA on our local property tax, our parcel tax. So before, it's about 94% of our total budget is tied to COLA. And now moving to basic aid status, I figure only about 4% of our total budget right now is connected to COLA. So that's why I was kind of saying that we in the past have had to be so fixated and talking about COLA and dealing with the effects of COLA. But now with this shift, it's not as critical. I mean, there is a benefit. I mean, I'm not going to say that we don't benefit from it, but we don't benefit as much when you start looking at the amount of our budget is tied to influences with the COLA.
So once we make that shift to basic aid, what will be the single biggest budget item tied to COLA? Is that something to do with special education?
Well, I mean, yes, funding for special education, and we do get some unrestricted dollars like the lottery, state lottery revenues. So those are all still tied to a COLA.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. Here's just some numbers, as I think I started talking about the 5.33 for 22-23, and then the governor also projected updated COLA projections for the out year, and so those are kind of figured in now into our assumptions. And then specifically these numbers I'm talking about, we'll be bringing this back to you at one of the March meetings for our second interim. So when we bring to you second interim, this will factor in all of the stuff that we got from the January budget. A couple of those other important pieces here, the STRS and the PERS rates. So the STRS and the PERS rates have been holding the last couple of years, but it's now projected to increase. So STRS is projected to increase from 16.92 to 19.10% next year, and PERS is planning to increase from 22.91 to 26.10. So for the Cal STRS, the increase is about 2.18%, and so roughly on a $78 million certificated payroll, it's about a $1.7 million increase just for that one data point. And then for classified, for the PERS increase, it's an increase of about 3.19% from the prior year. And on a $20 million classified payroll, it's roughly about a little bit more than $600,000. So roughly what, $2.3 million increase for pension costs, just straight based on the rate increase. That's assuming payroll is the same amount of payroll from the prior year.
Chris, does that mean you are or aren't taking into account step and column?
Well, this is based off of what we project as well, the step and column for next year as well.
So when you're saying same,
Same amount of personnel,
Got it.
assuming step and column, and then the increase in the rate for stars in person.
Thank you.
This was just a slide, this was talking about the changes in the volatility with the COLA rates. And I mean, the great news is that we've not had a COLA as high as 5% in quite a while. But I mean, like anything else, it's going to drop. I mean, but more realistically, if the funding system that we were in could give us a more stable way to predict our revenue, we could do a much better job in terms of planning our future. But I mean, if this is what we have to deal with. This was a very nice graph that school service provided to help describe the cliff. You've heard me talk about the cliff in terms of this. So I just thought this was a good example. I'm just gonna skip real quick. So this to illustrate, we're in the 21-22 school year, and then obviously 22-23 would have been the cliff that hit us. But go back in time. Because of that whole harmless, we had the whole harmless this last year. Okay, we had the whole harmless this year. So 21-22, we were actually funded, similar to how we were funded in 1920. And so we had 2 years of this protection, because remember, when you're declining enrollment in district, you're going to be funded on the higher ADA, which in this case would have been the prior year. So 2021, we were declining, we were funded on the higher 1920. This current year, because of that whole harmless, we weren't funded based on 2021, we are still funded based on 1920. But then next year, the cliff, right? The cliff hits us, that whole harmless goes away. And so for purposes of funding, if we were still going to be funded on a per student basis, we would be funded based on this year's actual student body. And whatever that P2 ADA number is a lot less than where it was when we were funded. So this is, I think, a good illustration of that cliff effect. Next slide, please. And then here are just some of the numbers. I apologize that maybe this version you can see it. The one that we gave you the other night wasn't very clear, but this kind of shows you a couple things, and I want to point out a couple things. So when you look at the slide here, when you look at the year 22-23, that's for next year. What's highlighted in the green is actually based on the governor's January budget assumption. So the 22-23 right there is based on the 5.33% COLA, and I factored in the new projected COLAs. But then the column just in front of it is what we were using previously based on the previous assumptions. So this kind of gives you a sense in terms of, again, what we're projecting property taxes to be. As I said a little earlier, we're now going to be relying solely on the property taxes, as long as the property taxes are greater than what we would get from the student population, how much we get per student. So we're projecting, actually this year, 21-22, we're estimating that our property taxes this year will be about 125,000. Next year, we're projecting property taxes to be 135,712,000. So what about what did I say? About a $6.5 million increase right there. So we're going to see an increase in terms of funding for next year, about $6.3 million just in property taxes. So as we've talked about the changes with the COLA, even with the change in the COLA, it still doesn't calculate out to be more than what we would get straight based on the property taxes. So I'm going to stop for a second and let that marinate a little bit.
Just a quick question, Chris, and thanks for this. This is a really helpful graph. Where are we getting the assumptions on the property tax growth from? Is that from the county or?
Directly from the county assessor's office. And they will, actually, they're due to send out an update this month in February. So every quarter that they do it.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So what this is showing is yellow is what we were originally projected to get, and green is what the new budget assumptions, COLA increase going forward is what's.
Yep, what's in green is based on the January assumption. These numbers will change when the May revise comes out. But what right now doesn't show that there are any changes or any changes with the property tax assumption. Once we get that information in February, if the assessor's office has a new number, we'll be able to plug that number in. But this is still based on the fall's property tax numbers from the state, from the county.
So this year, the difference between the two, the original projected COLA and the new COLA was $3.5 million. So if I look out to 23, 24, and I see a projection of less than $3.5 million between the green new projection for COLA that year and the property tax projection for that year that's less than $3.5 million. Am I nervous that if the state had another banner year and came out with a big COLA again next year that we bounce back out of basic aid?
Great question. I looked at that too.
Okay, good.
So here's my rough analysis on that. I didn't factor in yet how much of a COLA would break that or tip us backwards. But think about the possibilities that the COLA would reach an astronomical number to do that. I don't think that's likely. But when you look at student enrollment, right? If we were funded based on enrollment, which was 2 years ago, that's roughly about 3,500 more kids. So adding 3,500 more kids back into the equation, and also the continued COLA increases, could put us back closer to being in that category. But I mean, my sense is that the projected increases in our property tax value is going to continue at a pace that probably will stay in front of COLAs. Whether it gets in front of, changes with the population, I don't know.
But where else? But if the state revenue in 23, 24 has another year like this year, or for next year, basically, has another year like this year, Prop 98 says they're going to have, the guarantee says it's coming into education. They're going to have to put it somewhere. So you're thinking they're not going to put it on the COLA like they did this year?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, even though the governor's projecting 5.33.
Yeah.
And then as I mentioned earlier, the LAO came out with a number this morning, 6.17%.
I saw.
But again, the reality is that that's not going to, the assumption would be is would you have back-to-back years?
Right, but next year they've got us at 3.6, right?
Correct.
Not down at that 2.48. So, yeah, okay.
Well, and I think the question and the comment really do resonate with the previous conversations that we've had about our shift into basic aid is really when we say that term barely basic aid and being a little in that gray area where there is the fear, would we flip one way or the other? That's constantly something that we're going to have to monitor and look at each year as we move forward.
You're so right. Okay, so it's that whether or not we bounced or not is less the question of whether or not we kissed that barely basic aid threshold. Okay, all right, thank you.
And then I will end on this one piece. I mean, we're talking about how much additional revenues we're generating, right, from the property taxes or through COLA. But we also know that there's all these other things that are all these other things that are having to be paid from these COLAs. I mean, we're not talking today about more than the stirs and purrs. I mentioned that stirs and purrs, that's what about a 2.3 million dollar increase. But we still have a lot of other year-to-year costs that are now no longer having to be funded from the COLA, and it's all going to be coming from the property tax. So again, imagine that when we were in a COLA environment, we were saying that the COLA had to cover all these costs. Well, now the shift to moving to property taxes, that we're now having to say that the property taxes are now having to cover all these costs. Right? Question?
Just had a question about if I know you probably got like the information from a presentation from school services. Is there any prediction or trend on how different the May revision will be at this point?
Well, I mean, from what I read and from what has been my experience, obviously, is that, you know, the May revise, unless if the economy continues to get better or perform better, the likelihood that the May revise is going to come back with a budget that's probably more than what the governor is projecting. But 9 times out of 10, what the governor comes out in January is most of the time what he gets. So I think all bets right now is we're probably going to see nothing less than what he's getting, what he's proposing now. If anything, I think our governor has been wise in terms of making sure that, you know, any funding, you know, isn't ongoing. Well, I hate to say that, it's not wise, but they haven't been giving us, right, any additional funding for ongoing things. And if anything, I would imagine a lot of one-time things. I mean, my biggest fear right now is that we're going to be moving back to when we had all those categorical programs back in the days before LCFF. So I think, in politically speaking, I think there's a shift right now where we're seeing a lot of this money, whether it's for special interests or not, being allocated to school sites in the form of all these grants, all these programs that Allison's having to write plans up for, with all these particular strings attached. I think they're moving in that direction. So my guess is that, you know, if there's any additional money on top of what we're hearing now, they're going to just go ahead and give us it in a form of more programs and things like that. So that's just my personal take on that.
Thank you, that's helpful.
And I think that's, well, oh, and then the last slide, I think this universal meal. I'll say this, Nicole's going to talk about this tomorrow night. It's exciting. And then just to wrap things up, I mean, so I think school services was just highlighting the many things that we still have to continue to deal with. Obviously, COVID, school districts are dealing with potential layoffs. As though it's not, I mean, I know we're at the table now talking about increases, but I mean, when you look at the state minimum wage right now, that's going to continue to drive where I think our compensation is going to be. And we talked a little bit about stuff like bonds and things like that. So those are pretty much it from the presentation. So I think we're at the last slide. Any questions? Oh, yeah, it's okay. And this last slide was just, I had mentioned this earlier. These are the timelines right now. So we'll get the county assessor's office information this coming month, and we'll update that when we do the second interim. All right. I managed to keep it under our time.
Great job.
Anything?
I got mine answered along the way. Thank you.
Good. Good then. I think you did very well then. Some a 5 minutes break or 3 minutes break at least. Or a break, 3
Pick a
minutes, okay?
5-minute
5
break.
minutes break.
And there were no public comments on this
Oh,
session.
yes, okay. You're okay. Go ahead.
All right, so for our last session, session number 4, we wanted to share, bring back some additional information about our middle school comparisons and continuing that dialogue that we had back in November. We do have a couple guests that are joining us virtually, so I'm going to turn over to Allison and she will get us started.
Yes, thank you. So we're going to try to do 3 things here for this portion. The first will be to remind ourselves where we left off in the conversation in November. So we'll start off with a few reminders, and then we'll provide an update on some of the things that you asked about at that time. and then we'd like to give you a window into where we think we're going next in terms of process and some of the things we're thinking about, and get your feedback on that. So I'll be doing the first couple of slides, and then our director, Marie Crawford, will join us, as well as some of our middle school principals. All of our middle school principals will be joining us for the meeting, and we'll have a chance to weigh in later on if you'd like to hear from them. So to start us off here, we included the guiding questions that we shared with you on the next slide in November. And these questions were, do all students attending CUSD middle schools have equitable experiences? And we've talked about courses, time, and opportunities. And this was really rooted in our desire to be sure that there are similar experiences for students across our campuses. We know that each campus has unique qualities, but we also want to make sure that students have similar experiences across the sites. And then the second question was, what middle school schedule best prepares students for future success in high school, college, career, and in life in this rapidly changing world? Going on to the next slide, we talked at the November board advance about our strategic plan, our portrait of a learner, and the goals related to this conversation tied to that, as we see here. So things like making sure we provide an equitable broad course of study, that we're attending to our targets in the area of personalizing and challenging learning experiences, and developing the whole child. So we provided a report to you, and we heard from the middle school principals in November, and you reflected back to us some of the things that you'd like us to focus on as we work towards those inquiry questions. So I'm going to pass it to Marie, and she will reflect back on what we heard from you at the board advance.
And so if we could go to the next slide. Thank you. So at the last board advance in November, there were a number of areas that we identified as focus areas. And these included offering equitable learning time spent in core courses. So thinking about courses like math and science and English language arts and social studies. We also landed on wanting to provide equitable planning time for teachers because we found that there was a little bit of a difference in that. We wanted to also look at expanding electives so that 7th and 8th grade students can choose a second elective. So that was a priority that was heard loud and clear. And then establishing a social emotional learning class to help students feel connected and supported at school. We also weighed in on scheduling intervention and support during the school day and not just during zero period. So we're going to be looking at these different pieces that we've collected. And there was a request to learn more about clubs and activities. So we have that information today to bring to you. If we could go to the next slide. So today, our presentation will be including the following. We're going to be sharing information about the sports programs that we have at each middle school and the clubs and activities that are across the middle school. And we've put them into categories, especially for the clubs and activities. We're going to share some information about interventions that are currently scheduled within the school day, so you can see what we're offering right now and get a sense on the timing of when they're offered. We're going to present a process and some timeline for the shifts. This is a pretty fast process, but we've got amazing folks working together on this. And then we're also going to discuss the implications for a state Senate bill that has been passed about the school start time. So Senate Bill 328, which is impacting the high schools as well as middle schools in terms of the start time. And we're going to gather your feedback regarding the process and timeline for Senate Bill 328. So that's our overview, and I am going to turn it over now to Joe Nuno, who will take it away from here.
Afternoon, everyone. So I will be taking us through the next two slides. The first slide that we're looking at right now is after school sports. And then at the top, you'll see all of our categories from basketball to wrestling. And then obviously you'll see all of our schools. So in looking at this slide, you'll see that all of our schools offer all of the sports through our Valley Athletic League. And again, this is always depending on student interest as well as the coaching availability. So we offer a plethora of sports, and all of our schools take part in these sports. So next slide. And then this slide is our current year's club offerings. I think with the caveat to understand that these clubs are student interest based, as it says down with the asterisk, and this does change year to year. So you'll see that we do have a varied offerings from tech media journalism all the way through to language offerings. You'll see that each of our school sites offer anywhere from 12 to 21 opportunities for students in both leadership and expressing their creativity. Also to mention, all of our sites do have a student council and active web program, which stands for Where Everybody Belongs. So those are my two slides, and then I'll pass it on to our next principal.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the current intervention courses that we have at our different middle schools. As you can see, we all have intervention courses. They may look a little bit different from school to school. Some of them are offered to sixth graders only, and then some of them 7th and 8th, and then some of them offered to all grade levels. They pretty much span between a math intervention, language arts intervention, or possibly an intervention that's really focusing on executive functioning skills, like organization and planning and that sort of thing. As you can see, we have a varying number of students at each school that attend the intervention. And these students are usually chosen by looking at their grades, possibly their progress report grades or their actual grades at the semester. We also, now that we have iReady, we really take a look at our iReady intervention, our students that are qualifying for intervention that are in the yellow or red sections, so the below grade level or far below grade level. And you can also see there how many FTEs are dedicated at each school, depending upon the needs of the intervention classes. And then the next slide. So for the timeline and the process that we're looking at in order to kind of gather more information with both the site team as well as the district team, we started out in January and February forming those teams and also identifying the timeline. So what it's going to look like for the rest of this year and then beyond. And we started out really looking at the reality of what each one of the schools are currently offering. In February and March, we are looking at the quick wins. So looking at the benefits and challenges and impacts of a potential master schedule change, and analyzing all the input that we are gathering from the different teams. And then from there, really kind of prioritizing what it is that we might be able to do potentially next year. And that's all going to be reported back to the board on March 24th. The next two phases are a little bit further down the line. So in April, May, and then fall of 2022. In April and May, we're going to start looking at student interests through surveys, potentially if there's hiring, looking at that master schedule and how that may need to be built differently. And then also looking at things like facilities, because that's all kind of tied together. And then phase 2 discussions are actually executing the plan that is decided upon as time goes by. So how will we be going about this? We've created think tank teams, and there are essentially two separate teams. There's the site team and the district team, and they're going to be working together. But the site team is basically built with all staff members in mind. So each site will be kind of creating their own site team. So with staff members, as well as having some of the community with our school site councils or parent or PAC and ELAC teams. We'll also be incorporating our FAC members and then student leadership teams as well. It's going to be a focus and flare process where we look at the site team. We're going to be gathering information from them. And then from there, flaring out and then coming back into the district team with that information that we've gained from the site level. And the district team is also made up of FAC members from the sites, principals from each site, special education staff members, presidents from CEA and CSEA, facilities and operations, ed services and HR, and then site council parents. So that's basically what the think tank teams are going to look like and how decisions and synthesizing information is going to look. And now I'll pass it on to Kit.
Thanks, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. As considerations are made, there is a change coming down the pike in Senate Bill 328 that shows for the 22-23 school year that schools cannot start earlier than 8 a.m. On the subsequent slide, you'll see that none of our schools officially start before that time. But as we consider additions to the schedule, as we look at zero period and redefining zero period to be more inclusive of all students, it is something to be aware of. As soon as that zero period is counted, in instructional minutes, then it becomes part of the school day, and Senate Bill 328 would impact that. And we would need to take that into consideration. Without being obvious, this was put into place by the legislature to benefit our students and then provide more sleep, more rest for them to have a slower start to the day and a less frenetic start to their day, knowing what we know about adolescents and the changes they're going through during middle school. Should this align with the high school, we would want to know what implications this has for the high school as well, so that we can consider our siblings that are dropped off at FUHSD and here in CUSD. So we would want to have a conversation with the high school before considering the drastic changes to our start times. When you do look at the next slide, 72, you'll see that there is disparity. We identified that back in November as far as start times. And the critical thing to note here is that with the adoption of that law, should zero period become a component of the regular school day and counted in our instructional minutes, then it would need to start after 8 o'clock. So what are the implications should we shift to a day that does start at 8 o'clock? You'll find that on slide 73. There bulleted are a bunch of implications for consideration when looking at master schedules and the section partitions within those master schedules. Overall, it increases flexibility. The more blocks that we offer throughout the day, the more partitions that we offer students throughout the day, the more opportunity they have to take a variety of classes throughout the day or throughout the week. And so by incorporating a zero period or a seventh period or a seventh partition, however we count it, that increases opportunity for students. It increases our availability of staff to teach those sections. More staff partitioned throughout the day. Doesn't mean necessarily they have to teach all of those sections, but there are more staff and more sections to cover those sections throughout the day. One of the challenges we have right now is collaborative time for teachers throughout the day. We have our Wednesday late start, which is an amazing time for teachers to collaborate. But for a lot of us, it's been really hard to have shared prep time in their prep partitions in their periods throughout the day. And so potentially we could bring back some cross prep time where perhaps language arts teachers all had a common prep, say third period or fifth period. And we've gotten away from that over the years as the schedules become more and more constrained. I already shared with you, obviously, a push towards a later start is good for our kids and adolescents and the changes their bodies are going through. And then we covered this already, 75% or more enroll, it's counted in the instructional minutes. And so in building a schedule, we have to be mindful of the overall instructional minutes and how that lines up against 8 o'clock. It does impact the afternoon as well. If we were to shift to an 8 o'clock start time with more partitions, we would need to consider our end time and how that relates to all the different activities that we offer after school, including sports. And so we would need to look at that piece. And that would obviously take partnership with the high school, with our elementary feeder patterns, and with Valley Athletics. And in some cases with the city of Cupertino, where we have shared use facilities agreements, et cetera. And so that would necessitate further conversation. I believe I was the last dedicated speaker for slide 73, and slide 74 is board feedback and considerations. I don't know if Marie or Allison wants to pull us all back together.
Thank you, Kit. Yes, so we wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on the implications around considering the 8 o'clock start time and zero period, as well as the engagement process and timeline that we've laid out. It is very tight to start this kind of a process now for next year. So as Sarah said, we would anticipate looking for kind of those initial shifts, kind of tweaks to the schedule between now and when we need to begin planning that in spring, and then continuing the process into next school year if we're thinking about additional shifts that may be possible for the coming years.
So maybe we could break these two down and get feedback on each of them individually. I don't know if you want to tackle the first one first and see questions, comments, feedback. On the
Yeah, I think
implications of ADM.
that's right. I think, is there any questions first of all, I think, before that, right? Yeah. Clarification. Yes.
We're talking about zero period, right? The first one?
Or any questions
Any
in general on the
questions,
presentation. If you
Okay, so I'm not super familiar with zero period or why we do it. So I'd like to know that. And I'd like to know what would happen if we didn't do zero period, if we just had a school day that looked like from 8 to 3. And every kid came from those times and they would still be able to do after school sports and sleep in the morning, the amount of time that the state wants them to, and all of that. I don't understand zero period and why it's important.
Would one of the principals like to answer and share from their point of view what the zero period and how that assists their site?
I'd be happy to. There's two basic ways that zero periods function in Cupertino. Some of them, it's just another period where the kids have another opportunity. And in other schools, it's an add-on to provide intervention. So if you think about a special education student that's receiving services on an IEP and they need to take a learning skills class, it takes away their elective in the school day. We give them a zero period so that they can have another place to take PE at Lawson, for example, or whatever the class might be. And now they've got another partition in their schedule to take that fun middle school like elective. So I think it's really important for the board to consider partitions as standalone partitions and what we're serving within those partitions, because zero period is a perfect example of being defined two completely different ways across the 5 middle schools. And what you're really talking about is just another partition.
So talk a little bit more about partitions. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that.
Sure. Well, so at Lawson, we have 6 dedicated partitions, a 6-period day. Zero period is an add-on. At Cupertino, they have 7 partitions, 7-period day. And I don't think they even call it a zero period, right?
Right.
Okay. And then somewhere we have a zero period where almost all the kids take it. I think it's Miller, right? Where it's a part of a lot of the kids' day. And so it almost gets counted as like a 7-period day, even though it's an add-on. But Joe and I at Lawson and Kennedy, it's really just this funky standalone that isn't part of our 6-period day and just kind of gets added on.
So what would happen if you went to a school day that went from, say, 8 o'clock to 3? I don't know if that's instructional minutes correct or not, but and every kid came from 8 to 3, and there was no such thing as an add-on period. How would that impact the program for kids?
Well, maybe I want to let somebody else chime. I mean, just right off the bat before I let somebody else chime in, it's making sure we cover the amount of partitions. So if you did, so like Cupertino would want, if it were just a, straight apples to apples, they'd need 7 partitions in that day to run similar to how they're running now. And we would need We would need to get to 7 because now we would have to be able to include all of that intervention and hopefully do more with that extra partition throughout the day.
And is that a bad thing if you did that?
No?
Okay, thank you. I'm just not
Well,
sure.
It's more opportunity for kids. I mean, that would not be a bad thing at all.
Okay, thank you. So those are my questions. Thanks.
Yeah, but just I wanted to just ask clarification here. Okay, so does it add then more time for the teachers? Will it have a problem then if you're going for a plan like CMS? Like I think that's what Phyllis is trying to say, that like there's no zero period task. They have a start and end. Every kid gets the same thing. So because of what I understand is zero period, not every teachers are engaged today, right? So you have some amount of teaching time less for certain teachers.
So contractually, all teachers work 7¼ hours. So whatever the school day is established around that 7¼ So even though middle schools have a different start and end time, it entails 7¼ hours for teachers to work. So within that time frame, they are getting their 1 through 6, their 0 through 6, their 1 through 7 under that 7¼ hours.
So by making that proposal, there's no impact at all on that.
Yeah, that would still, that what Phyllis had mentioned does still fall under the 7¼ work hours. My math is correct on that.
Thank you. Yeah, why don't we go ahead?
To clarify just really quickly though, you're like at Lawson, when we joked, would it be a bad thing? It depends on that bell schedule and how we build it out, right? Because if I just go from 6 to 7 and squish those periods, there would be a lot of concern around getting closer to like a 45-minute period or a 49-minute period versus a 52-minute period. And we talked through that a little bit in November about what that does to the time on task in those academic courses.
Okay, thank you.
Who wants to go?
I can go.
Yeah.
I guess in my mind, I'm breaking this down sort of into 3 buckets, and I want somebody to challenge me on my 3 buckets. My 3 buckets are sort of like implications for kids, implications for staff, and implications for our budget and operations. And so for kids, I don't see a lot of downsides here. I see kids get a second elective for our 7th and 8th graders. I see maybe there's more time in the schedule for SEL and connections, maybe with a mentor teacher. I think there was a mention of sort of I don't remember what we called it, but SEL class. I see maybe an opportunity to explore some more like through those electives. And it sounds to me like there aren't any big downsides as far as, after school sports can still exist, clubs can still exist, etc. For teachers, my bucket for that is there's some pluses in terms of if we could set the schedule up to allow for sort of built-in collaboration time, but there's also maybe some minuses in terms of trying to figure out or rebalance instructional minutes and, I'm sure there are other things in there, but in terms of the teaching 5 of 7 that's proposed for all staff, I don't think we're necessarily adding to it. And in some cases, we're taking away from it in terms of teaching versus prep time. I guess I should say in that bucket, it's also, for our principals and our counselors and our APs and stuff, there's certainly the master scheduling challenge piece that I guess I would throw into the sort of staff bucket. And then for budget, I can't see how we implement this without some investment in terms of, it would seem to me that at all sites, we wind up needing to reconfigure and probably have some expenses associated with the staffing piece that goes along with implementing this for the kids. So what am I missing? What do I have wrong? What should have been in there that isn't, et cetera?
Does anybody from the principal group want to respond to that?
Sure, I can respond to some of that. I don't know if you guys can see me or not. So I think your question, Lori, is in regard to Phyllis's comment about making zero period available for all students. Is that those are the implications that you're looking for?
I guess, like for the student bucket, is there a downside in this for students? Because like I see the added elective opportunity, I see embedding social emotional learning, I see moving intervention into the school day, I see still get to do sports and clubs. Like I don't see a negative there. So I guess, am I missing anything there for students?
So, I mean, I sort of see that we've got two conversations happening. One has to do with an 8 a.m. start time and aligning around that, which is a different topic than making zero period or making every period available for every student, whether you categorize that as 0 through 6 or 1 through 7. So,
oh, sorry, we're doing general questions. So if we're only on 8 a.m., maybe I'm in the wrong spot. I'm sorry, Amy.
I don't know. I don't know. I can respond to it anyway. So I think one of the pieces is that traditionally, even at Miller, where we probably have the highest rate of students opting into a zero period, that there is still an element of choice that is embedded for families who do not want their child to start school at that earlier time. And feel that the additional class is not beneficial for their student. And so that would be a potential implication for a family, that there would be some limitation if it was now a requirement for everyone to be there for the entirety of the school day. Your comments about the budget issues or just the, needing additional teachers in order to make that happen is accurate, as well as a potential for facilities needs, because we would now have X number of students, depending on the school, on campus during a time when they are not traditionally on campus. So where we would previously split a classroom and share it between two teachers, we would, no longer be able to do that because a space would have to be dedicated all day long to, to one person. So those are some of the kind of potential implications.
And thank you for that, Amy, too, because I know that had came up in our November meeting when one of the questions was, what about, what are some of the considerations? And I think we heard strongly from all 5 of you that it was, the staffing and the facilities needed to be taken into consideration.
Anything else that I should be like thinking big picture wise? Am I missing a bucket altogether, or any major things that I am not conceptualizing right?
I would say that one of the other pieces, big picture wise, would be maybe traffic. We don't have a scenario now where we have all of the students arriving at school at the same time. And so we have sort of a natural staggered start time, which I think sort of helps morning traffic and safety around the campus, of students getting to campus. But if we said, start time is 8 a.m. for every single child, then that would impact that. That would be a change.
So that's for 4 of you. That's Lawson, Kennedy, Hyde, and Miller. Right now, that kind of effectively have a staggered start. Okay. All right, thank you.
Lori, there's just a few, like one other couple of small things come to mind, aligning all the schools around meeting times. And for example, when we hold intervention meetings with parents and IEPs, some schools have some extra time in the morning to do that versus how they find time after school. So there's cultural shifts in the way there's precedence around, and those types of things that will have to be considered. And then I go back to just again the minutes. It's not just the number of periods, but it's the minutes the kids are spending on a particular schedule within each academic experience, and how important that is. You know, the adoptions that we've made over the years with CPM, workshop model, they're all meant to be, you know, where kids have time to collaborate and interact, and you know, and they can't, that's very hard to do in 45 and 50 minutes periods, 40 and 45-minute periods.
I just wanted to clarify that as well on the traffic part. It could be even the elementary schools around also.
Yeah.
Because unless we are going to, fine tune that, this is going to be an issue as well.
Right, well, in the high schools too.
Yeah, schools. But high
Yeah.
school, we don't have a control, but at least for the elementary perspective, then we'd have to be looking to in case we are doing.
Any kind of a time or a schedule change, we would have to collaborate and work very closely with the high school as well, and our elementaries.
Sure. I don't have any questions. I have comments and feedback. If people have questions, they can do that.
I had some questions. So I wanted to kind of touch back on the after-school sports and the club offerings. So thank you, very much for collecting the information. This isn't specifically related to the 8 a.m., but I'm just curious, do we also have data on how many of our kids are participating in these things? Whether it's sports or clubs? And then my other kind of connected question to that is how many of our staff are involved in that? Because I know our staff get adjunct duty with either being a club advisor or a coach or something like that. And then my kind of question that relates it all back to the scheduling is if we then shift the schedule so that everybody's got the same schedule, does that then impact the availability of faculty, of staff to do those kinds of adjunct hours? In other words, would that de-incentivize them from participating in those extracurricular activities?
Our principals want to answer that one?
I presented on those slides, so I will give it a take. I know I do not have specific numbers in terms of how many of our students or staff are integrated into both the after-school sports and clubs, but we could definitely go back to gathering that information. As far as the incentive around it, that's a great question. I don't know if it would directly affect their involvement. We do offer after-school clubs. A lot of our clubs take place at lunch, so that's a great question. I will defer to my colleagues.
I'll pipe in here. This is Jane from CMS. I do apologize that my camera is off. I'm actually sick, but this is important. I wanted to be here to participate. And I think speaking on behalf of CMS, where we have a full 7 periods fit within our 7.25 day, my teachers who participate in the after-school sports and the clubs outside of the school day, they do so because they're passionate about it. And that is something that they care deeply for and look forward to doing year after year when they have the capacity to. So that is just speaking on behalf of CMS.
The other area that we called out to work on was the equitable teacher planning time across site. So I think if we can address that, then that it could have potential positive implications on things like, adjunct duty responsibilities and club leadership. Right now, we're not achieving that, and sometimes, our teachers are just really stretched.
And I would just want to, add a caution, a great conversation, but to remind that we're not here to create or create new schedules today. We really want to engage in the process because each school, as each principal spoken, they each have unique challenges and unique needs on their campus. And so it really is, how do we meet those needs of students across the entire district? And it is going to take a long-term and really engaging all of the staff at all of the sites to be part of that process and decision.
So,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think my my reflection on it is I'm always worried about unintended consequences, right? So our good intention is we want to provide, you know, as many opportunities for the kids as possible within the academic schedule. But I get concerned in case there are unintended consequences of then taxing or reducing the extracurriculars or the other things that also are a rich part of making that student's school experience, you know, as good as it is. So that's what I'm trying to figure out or trying to ask is, I would hate for us to give some direction that then creates, you know, these other issues that we're not aware of or that we may not be thinking about in those areas.
Yes, I could add also that the first activity that we're thinking about doing with the staff to start is to have that conversation, help us look at these priorities that have been lifted up and talk about what would be the benefits, what would be the challenges, what could be some impacts that we're not thinking about, so that everybody's part of that conversation. So I think so far I'm hearing interest in continuing to talk about 8 o'clock, and we should move that into the conversation for these teams, but not try to make any immediate assumptions right now, because it's going to take a longer conversation.
I don't know a lot about master scheduling, but I know it's a huge challenge. And one of the things that would be important to me that I know would be a big challenge in terms of scheduling, and that is that teachers in the same discipline have common prep times. I think that's critical to them being able to do the most effective job they can do. Now, can that happen in our middle schools? I have no idea, but that would be something that I would like for us to consider.
Are we okay for comments, just general comments?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
unless any questions, any questions. I have one question.
Oh,
Okay,
please.
so you said about the after sports, like depends upon the coach availability. We put everywhere a check mark. It's there, but there's a caveat, put that coach availability. What is that? I think we should know. I think you presented that slide.
So each of our sports through Valley Athletic, we would have to have coaches to host those certain sports. For example, softball, you know, we might have a selection of students that want to play that sport, but if we're unable to get the coaches for that given sport, then we would obviously not be able to offer it at one or more of the school sites. And any other principals can chime in on that in terms of, I mean, basically, if we have a coach, yeah.
Budget or available? How is it? Is it because of the budget issues or anything?
It's just difficult to find people to coach sports. I think everyone is taxed with their time, and so oftentimes there are some sports that we're just not able to find a coach.
So every check mark here, there is an asterisk, then that's the case, right? So it's not necessarily that we will be offering it, because it's purely depending upon the coach's availability there.
Well, the intent is to offer it every year and throughout the 5 seasons. I think there's circumstances where there isn't a coach available, and I know Leslie works closely with the after-school sports.
The other piece is there have been times where there aren't enough students that are interested in a sport to field a team. So for example, softball, where some schools may have 2 teams, some schools may have enough interest for 3 teams, and some may only have an interest for 1. So it's multi-layered. So each season we offer all of these sports to all of our middle school students. Our ADs at the school site and our district AD and our principals recruit for coaches. But there are times where either because we can't find a coach or we don't have enough students, there's not that opportunity. But they try really hard to make sure that if there is student interest, we find either parents or staff members to participate.
Thank you. I think no questions, then we can go with the comments.
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
So I think to answer your first question in terms of the shifting 0 period to 8, I guess I would be in favor of doing that sooner rather than later, only because of the timeline of both the legislation and obviously what the high school district is going to be doing. And it kind of seems like if there's going to be changes, maybe we just do it and get that piece of it over with. Now, that said, I don't want to say that that's like a must. That's more of like a, if we're in that process and it makes sense, let's just jump in and do it. I don't want to go in presupposing that it's 100% doable in the timeline that's outlined for us. But I guess if push comes to shove and I have to choose one, I'd say doing it sooner rather than later would be my preference. And I think that's largely because I do think that's in line with, the whole reasons that it was proposed in the first place. It's in line with health of children, and it's in line with, mental and physical health, as well as sort of the times they're going to learn best. And that said, I do want to reflect back on sort of the layered piece. I think Amy was very sage in pointing out that it's one thing to consider the 8 a.m. start. It's another thing to consider the 8 a.m. start in the context of a 6-period or a 7-period day. And I think if I'm layering those two things together and I'm saying I would prefer to make the 8 a.m. shift sooner, whether or not that necessitates immediately making a shift to deciding on a 6 or a 7-period day, I maybe feel a little bit less strongly about if there's a way to sort of bridge it. But if it only makes sense to do it together, part and parcel, then, that I think would come out of whatever committee work you're going to do. I also liked sort of I don't remember which of you said it, but the notion of sort of choice rather than a fixed, mandated all kids will have 7 periods. The one place I maybe feel a little bit differently about that, and I've thought about like sort of listening to my colleagues, and like, I know Jerry and Sylvia in particular really bring up clubs and sports and after school enrichment a lot. And I think about, why do I feel differently about that as a parent with my CMS experience? And I think part of it is because my kid gets 2 electives. And so like, do I feel differently about that because of the opportunity for a second elective? I can't dismiss that out of hand, right? Like I can't.
Yep.
So, like part of that is, could we have both? Could we give people choice and say, if you are willing to give up that second elective, maybe you do have more time for, whatever your choice of using that time is versus, the other piece I would say though, that I am a big believer in CMS's bridge program. I've seen it work. And so maybe again, I'm saying like, I hope we'll explore that idea of maybe it's not one size fits all for all 3 grades. Maybe there's something different for our 6th graders as they're transitioning into middle school, and a part of a very intentional building a support system for our new middle schoolers, and maybe that is a larger SEL component and executive functioning component and all of that. And so does it necessarily have to be that all 3 grades make the shift into either a 7 or a 6, and or could we have some combination where maybe it is a 7-period day for our 6th graders, but something more like a 6+1, with the 1 being the choice of family dependent for 7th and 8th. I don't know. So anyway, that's just sort of my rambling thoughts on that. I definitely, regarding the engagement process and timeline, have seen the work of the focus and flares before, believe that that's worked well for us over and over again. And so I'm fine with sort of what's being proposed for going through that process again, and also knowing that the impact of that is the thing that's probably going to drive the timeline the most. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So happy to hear from everybody else too.
Sure, I'll go next. I'm sorting index cards in my head here of all the things I want to share. I think first of all, I really like the style of presentation. So thanks to Allison Marie and the 5 principals for doing this sort of team tag kind of. There's a dissonance here where I know they're looking at me from there, but I see them there, and so the human brain. Anyway, so I just want to kind of give some feedback on this, and I appreciated the presentation. I think it really highlighted the sort of the difficulty and the dimensions here, right? The 6 versus 7. Is it zeroed or not zeroed? Is it opt-in or is it? And there's a lot of, and so I kind of, I guess I'm kind of, let's see, where am I on this? is that I think the 5 principals and Marie and Allison are much better at designing the schedule or whatever than the 5 of us are, right? And so I don't really have a lot of comments to the specifics. I come back on slide 62, the guiding questions, right? Is it equitable? Is it the best preparing the students? And so I would just ask you all to kind of keep that in mind. I would just assert that I don't think it's equitable now. I think there must be some feeling that otherwise we wouldn't all be here. And I think my sense at a high level is that this is an equation with a lot of variables and dimensions. And to sort of support to support individuality and option and this and this and this and that, I don't think that's going to work. And I think we need to recognize that practices will have to change. Otherwise, I think it's very hard to see how things are equitable if there's so many dimensions that are changing. So I'm supportive of some of these dimensions changing, and I think staff and the principal should decide on that. I think what I would like to have come back to us would be what are the trade-offs and what are the options? And much like when we're talking about the school consolidation, there were a set of variables that came to the board. These are the and I'm not saying we need to vote on it. But just for us to better understand what are the trade-offs you had to consider, because I don't think we can do everything for everyone. I would just say that I support 8 a.m. also. I think Lori gave a lot of good reasons there. And I would support having 7 versus 6 or 6 plus 0, right? But again, these are variables, and I would, if it somehow doesn't work out that way, it's better to start at 9 with 6 periods. I'd love to see that option also. So I think for me, it's really, when it comes back, I really would like to see, there may be multiple options, and understanding what are the components, what are the dimensions, and how they address these 2 guiding questions. This is really my sort of feedback. In terms of the engagement and timeline, I would like to see something be done by next fall. If there are some quick wins that come out of the process earlier talked about in March, we might see what are some of the potential quick wins. That would just be great. I think I would, I think a lot of times when I do this, I get into a difficult situation, and there's what's a term, analysis paralysis. There's just so many dimensions. You end up wanting to study some more. And I think to the extent that we can make some progress towards some of these 2 questions we have here, that would be great. So I think it's more philosophical in nature, but I think at this point, I really don't feel like I know enough to be able to sort of just say, to give useful input on any of these dimensions. So thanks.
Thanks, Jerry.
So right now, I'm thinking I like the idea of a common school day, not necessarily the same school day for every school, but a common one, and common prep times for the teachers, if that can happen. I'm really looking forward to the things that Sarah described when she talked about surveys among parents and students. I hope that we get some information back on that. I think that would be critical for us to know. And in terms of the 8 o'clock start time, right now, our schools are all in compliance with that. So my wondering is, do we need to make that decision now, or can we wait to make that decision until we've decided on what the school schedules are going to look like, since we are already after 8 o'clock on the start times? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that anybody does, but it's just a wondering that I have. And I think the focus and flare, as Lori said, is a really good way to go in terms of process. So thank you, Satish.
Yeah, thanks for that. So then,
So I think it's funny, Lori, because you're like, oh, well, this is what the way CMS does, because my experience is, well, this is the way Miller does it, and I like it, right? So we all gonna, have our own biases from our own experiences.
Which probably says I would have liked Miller if I was there, and you would have liked CMS if you were there, right? Instead of what you know.
Well, Miller offers the optional 0 period for 7th and 8th. And we could, we don't have to go back and forth on which ones are better, because, we'll let staff do that. But I guess in principle, I agree with Jerry in terms of, like, I think everybody should have every opportunity to take both, and that they should have those options available to them. So I would, in theory, I would like to have every school have 7 periods and every student have 2 electives. But I'm also thinking about there are students, there are some students who, even though Miller offered it, the student and the family chose not to do it for whatever reason. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes some of our students that, aren't as engaged in school or struggle in school. I don't know that forcing an extra elective on them is necessarily going to make them like school better, I guess is where I'm thinking about. And I guess that's also where I go back to clubs and sports, because sometimes those are the things that the student looks forward to. So that's where I get concerned about, if we push everything back and then it impacts, let's say, the sports schedules because they're competing with other schools outside of our district, or if it impacts the faculty availability to be the advisor for those schools, that's where I'm struggling with, because I don't know what those impacts are, and the principals are going to know this better. But I guess I don't have an answer. I don't have a specific direction in terms of like, this is what I want staff to do. I think these are just the things perhaps I'm hoping that staff can keep in mind as they come up with different options.
Thanks, Ilya. So I think most of the things have been covered, which I was thinking, but a couple of things which I want to really highlight is, again, equitable experience is one of the objectives, right? I think that's a consistent way of offering everything to everybody, right? So either go with something like a CMS option kind of, there is no zero, don't even call a 0 period, like, have everything to everybody kind of, right? But however, that is very easy for me to say that, but I think I've not seen a challenges slide here with this. Like, we have been talking a lot of pros about that, but what are the other challenges? That were some of the questions about the staff timings and things like that. So did we look into all the angles, like if you had to implement that, right? So forget what time we are going to start it, but are we going to have 7 periods for everybody everywhere, even if it's 9 o'clock or 8:30? Is it doable or not, right? What other constraints we have? Let's list it out that and see that whether we can. And the last one, which probably again I want to harp on this, like the traffic part of it, because that is we keep getting the mails from different people about even the current traffic situation itself, right? And especially with some of the school closures and stuff like that. So especially when some of the middle schools, which is very closer to that, will have a bigger impact, because already it is clogged, and over and above, if you're changing the timing, we have to. So we should look into a bigger picture on that, like whether we are involving FUHSD or our elementary schools also should be considered. So traffic should be definitely a big contributor for all these things, and we need to be considering that when we are making an decision. Thanks.
So I think what I heard through it all is that you are all comfortable with the engagement process and timeline. If we can have some of those quick wins that we could implement in the fall, we'll absolutely do that through that process. I think one of our goals here was really to understand the complexity. What seems simple when we say a simple 2 electives really is not simple, and that's why it really is a process. And so we'll require everyone to kind of take a step back and think outside. And there's a lot of different options that can be considered as they work through. And I do think that's a really important, engaging part for our principals to have with their staff as they talk about what's working on their campus, where are they headed, how would that work for them, and then to be able to identify what those needs are. I don't know that any of the campuses could make the change that we are even talking about without giving them some additional support, whether through facility support or through staffing support. So I think that's the other piece that we all have to acknowledge. We're making a change, a shift, that there is going to be some cost to. And I think that aligns with where we're going with our district priorities. We want to have that equitable experience for all students. There is going to be some initial cost, but the outcome is going to be that high achieving and a vast world of experience for our students. So just to keep those in mind as well. So I think I'll look to Allison. I think we have enough to continue the work and begin our process and timeline.
Yes, thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. So are we done with all the presentations?
We are. That concluded session 4.
Yeah, and somebody said it, I don't remember who, but this is so valuable to have the principals to be able to answer directly. That's great. I love this. So thank you.
Thank you all, principals. So we will go to, I think we are almost the end. We will be going for the closed session. Do we have a public comment for the closed session?
No public comment, and there were no public comments on the previous session either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, then. Appreciate it. Shall we go for closed session?
We'll go
then,
closed
Ajay?
session. We'll go right across the walkway here.
Okay. So we'll adjourn for closed session now. So we are back from the closed session and there's nothing to report. So the meeting is adjourned.
You.
Thank you.
See you guys
At
tomorrow.
4:25.